approval of the minutes for the April 8th, 2020 meeting. Would anybody like to make a motion?
I'll move approval.
A motion by Brenda,
I'll second.
second by Sarah. We'll go down the list. Maureen? Maureen, you're muted.
Yeah.
Okay.
There we go.
Amy?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Andreas?
Yay.
Sarah?
Yes.
Crystal?
Yes.
Brenda?
Yes.
John?
Yes.
And is Carolyn in attendance or no? I don't see her name anywhere.
She is not. She sent me an email saying she can't attend.
Okay. Okay, thank you. All right, motion passes. Next, we have the report of the chair and the vice chair. Since I have not left my house in days, I have nothing to report. Brenda, how about you? Brenda, you're on mute.
I have nothing to report.
Thank you. And now we'll take the report from the director.
Yeah, just a couple of things. Once again, thank you everyone for joining us at the meeting. Just to let you know, if you are having difficulty, other difficulties, and you would like to submit comments, we have an email address. I have a couple of co-hosts in this meeting that are helping monitor everything. So we have an email address. I will actually share that here. Can you all see that? So the email address is here, planning.comments@slcgov.com. So what you can do is send us an email with your comments, and then we can read those into the record as part of the public hearing. Also, move you over and allow you to speak.
Hey, Wayne, it's Paul. Maybe John Anderson could also put that in the Q&A. I'll put the email addresses.
Yeah, that'd be great. A couple other things. Once again, we have a couple of co-hosts that we're trying to monitor. Kind of everything coming in. We have some Q&A sections. You can actually submit questions there, and we'll get back to you. Or we could try to help out and troubleshoot some things. We ask everybody to be respectful when you leave comments. And we'll just go from there. As part of the director's report, we do have an extension of a previous request, and Dave Gellner is the project planner that worked on that, and he's here, so he'll give a little overview of that. Go ahead, Dave.
Okay, this is the Red Rock Brewery. It received at 426 West, 400 North in April of 2019. Received both conditional use approval and conditional building site design review approval. They haven't proceeded on. There's been delays in the schedule moving forward on the project. Their CBSDR was good for 2 years, but the conditional use is only good for 1 year, so it would be expiring a couple days from now. So they're looking for a 1-year extension to the conditional use approval.
Thanks, David. Any questions from the commissioners on the request? Would anybody like to make a motion to approve the requested extension?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you. Okay, we've got a motion by Sarah and a second, sorry, I missed the second.
Matt?
Matt, thank you, Matt. Let's go down. We'll go with John,
Yes.
Brenda, you're muted, Brenda. Give a thumbs up if you vote yes. All right, Brenda votes yes. Crystal?
Yes.
Okay. Sarah?
Yes.
Andreas?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
Amy?
Yes.
And Maureen?
Yeah.
All right, motion passes. Wayne, anything else on the director's report?
No, that's the only thing on the director's report. I do think that I may have figured out why. No, never mind, sorry. No, go ahead and continue. I thought I figured out our unmute problem, but we'll figure it out.
Okay, let's move on to the public hearing portion. The next item on the agenda, number 2, ADU conditional use at approximately 629 East Roosevelt Avenue, case number PLN PCN 2020-00097. And Chrissy will give us the report.
Okay. Wayne, can you move it so I can share my screen?
Yep, it's on its way. There you
Thanks.
go.
Got it. Okay. Good evening, Commissioners. Can you all see my screen then?
Yes, thank you.
Perfect.
Yes.
So this is a conditional use approval request for a detached accessory dwelling unit. The property is located at 629 East Roosevelt Avenue. The property is zoned R1 5000 single family residential, which requires conditional use approval. The proposed detached ADU would be located in the northeast corner of the rear yard, as shown in that rust color. The building footprint is approximately 650 square feet, and it would be 1 story with a pitched roof measuring 17 feet in height. It does accommodate a 6-foot loft space, which is allowed under the code because it's not considered livable space. And the entrance of the ADU, which is this front facade here, faces Roosevelt Avenue. As shown on the site plan, a new driveway and parking area is proposed for the existing house and the ADU. That is right here, it comes in, and then the yellow spot is the parking proposed for the ADU, and the orange are the 2 stalls proposed for the single family residence. And then of note, the lot is 10,120 square feet, which is substantially larger than the average lots on the block face and in the neighborhood as a whole. And it's an R1 5000 zone. So the property, it can't be subdivided because it wouldn't meet the frontage requirements, but the lot area would allow for a second home, although the frontage requirements wouldn't. But just to illustrate that it is a substantially larger lot than we typically see in that area. So these are photos of the site. So the first one up on the top left is standing in front of the primary home on the property. And you can kind of see a little trampoline back in the corner, but that's the area where the proposed ADU will be located. And then the second photo on the top is just from the opposite direction, showing the site. And then the bottom, this is from the street view. So the fire hydrant and the power pole, in between those is where the new driveway would be located. And then this is the home that is directly east of the property, which would have the most impact from the new unit. So as far as public comment, a notice of the project was provided to the Liberty Wells Community Council, as well as property owners and residents within 300 feet. The Community Council did not ask the applicant or staff to present, and they did not provide any formal comment. Staff did receive 3 public comments regarding the proposal. 2 were through phone, and one of the phone calls indicated that he was in the area, but just had general questions and did not indicate a position on the proposal. And the other call also lived in the area, and she was generally against ADUs in that neighborhood, and she cited specific concerns in parking and traffic. And then one email was sent in, which is included in your staff report, that also cited concerns with traffic and parking, as well as the height of the ADU. The height does meet the standards of the code, which is 17 feet, though. So based on the staff reports, we recommend approval of this ADU. And that concludes my presentation.
Great, thank you, Chrissy. Any questions for Chrissy at the moment? Okay. Is the applicant here?
Yes.
Somewhere here, wherever here maybe?
Okay. So I'm Alexis Suggs, I'm the applicant. Essentially, Chrissy covered all of our bases in that the homeowners are wanting to put it in the rear of the yard, trying to make it as little impact as possible by minimizing where it is on the lot, and just introducing the driveway so that they would have its own parking, very clear. I don't know. If you have questions, ask me. Covered the bases very well.
Thank you. Okay. Any questions for the applicant? Oops. Now I can't see anybody because all I see is Chrissy's screen. All right, here we go. Okay, it looks like no one has any questions. Okay, thank you.
I do have a.
Okay, go for it.
I have a quick question. In the renderings, it shows a solid fence, and the photos, it shows a chain link fence. You're planning on replacing the fence with a solid fence?
So on the lot, there's two different fence types. It's both of those, the solid and the chain link. And so in the rear of the yard is solid fence, and more towards the front is chain link. And the portion of the lot that the house that the ADU would be on is solid, and we're proposing to keep that solid, and that for new fence that would go up would also be solid.
That's my only question.
Okay, thank you. Anyone else have questions before we move on? Okay, I don't see any. Okay, let's go ahead and open the public hearing. Community council representatives will have 5 minutes, individuals will have 2 minutes, and this is where I ask Wayne to survey to see if anyone from the community council is here that we can tell.
No, we do have a hand up, but it's Susan Klinker, who was the applicant for the other. Susan, can you lower your hand if you?
I don't know how to do that.
Okay. That's okay. We do have somebody raising their hand. Zachary, I'm going to move you to allow you to speak. Zachary, can you hear us? Zachary, are you able to speak? I just took you off.
How's that? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. And just go into my spiel.
Please state your name for the record as usual. Thank you.
Zachary Dussault, speaking in favor of the project. Actually had a chance to go out to the site 2 days ago to see the street, as it seems like most complaints about ADUs have to do with parking or vehicular access to the street. And I just wanted to bring up a city planning convention that would be, I think, applicable to this street, and it's called yield flow streets. So this is in Jeff Speck's Walkable City City Rules, page 119, who actually uses Salt Lake City as a bad example for how we plan cities. And yield flow streets basically are not wide enough for two cars to pass at once. So thus necessitate one car to pull to the side so that the other car may pass. And I know it seems like a counterintuitive logic that the more cars that are parking on the street, the safer the street is, but I think that's a really important thing to take into consideration with this street. And that's it.
Great, thank you. Wayne, is there anyone else who would like to speak?
Hey, Wayne, I have an email that came in that I would like to read if we have a moment. So on this project, we received an email from Julia Wood. I'll just read her email. It says, hello, I'm opposed to granting approval for this project. I'm against adding more congestion of cars as well as more people in my neighborhood. Roosevelt Avenue is a very busy street. I live on Browning Avenue, and when I'm driving north on 7th East, I have to turn left going west on Roosevelt because there is no turn lane for Browning. More often than not, cars are lined down both sides of the street, so two cars can't drive past one another at the same time because there isn't enough room. Sure, it says there's one parking space provided, but that doesn't mean anything. Residents are just parking on the street and wondering why their cars are vandalized and broken into. When I purchased my home, it was with the thought that this would stay single-family residential. That was over 30 years ago. Thank you, Julia Wood.
Great, thanks, John. Is there anyone else who has indicated they wish to speak?
I do not see any additional hands.
Okay. We'll go ahead and close the public meeting, bring this back to the commission. Brenda's waving a hand, but she's on mute. Brenda, on your screen, can you hit your microphone? It's not working.
Brenda, I just took you off mute.
Oh, okay, great. Thank you. That's all I wanted. I just can't stand it not to be able to talk. I did go by this one as well, and there is a lot of room on this property, and it seems like an ideal situation for an ADU. Does anyone know what the width of the street is there? No?
No, not off the top of my head, but I'll look and see if I can find.
Okay.
Any other questions or comments from the commission while Chrissy tries to look that up?
I have a question, Andres.
Okay, Andreas?
Yeah, for staff, I might have missed the first part. Was the ADU, was it on the property line, or was it on the more to inside of the property lot? How was that side of that ADU?
If I understand your question, the ADU is set back from the property line. I'm sorry, repeat your question. I didn't quite get it.
Yeah, actually, that was my question. Yeah, you did answer it. Thank you.
Okay, good.
Thanks.
Okay, just a minute, Commissioner. I'll find your question for the street.
Okay, thank you.
Hey, Chrissy, I'm going to beat you to the punch here. It looks like it's about 50 feet of right-of-way, but that includes the sidewalk, park strip, and gutter. So it looks like there's about 27 feet of asphalt.
Okay. So with two cars parking on either side,
That's tight.
that would be tight.
Okay. Any other questions for staff or discussion? Anyone willing to make a motion?
I'll make a motion.
Thank you.
Based on the information in the staff report, the information presented, and the input received during the public hearing, I move the Planning Commission approve PL and PCM 2020-00097 with the conditions listed in the staff report.
Okay, we've got a motion and a second by, is that Maureen?
Yeah.
Great. Motion by Matt, second by Maureen. Let's start with Maureen.
Yes.
Amy,
Yes.
Matt,
Yes.
Andreas,
Yay.
Sarah,
Yes.
Crystal,
Yes.
Brenda,
Yes.
Joan.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes unanimously. Thank you all for the presentation. We'll move on now to agenda item number 3, which is ADU conditional use at approximately 1807 South, 1900 East. Case number PLN PCM 2019-01065. And Linda is going to make the presentation.
Hi, can everyone see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Perfect. So this petition is a conditional use for a detached ADU to be placed in the rear yard of the existing single-family dwelling located at approximately 1807 South, 1900 East. The subject parcel is located on the northeast corner of 1900 East and Downington Avenue. The property is zoned R17000, single-family residential, which requires a conditional use approval for the construction of an ADU. Staff is recommending denial for the conditional use request. The proposed detached ADU would be located in the northeast corner of the rear yard. The building footprint is approximately 391 square feet with a gross area of 646 square feet. It would be a 2-story structure containing 1 bedroom, 1 bath, with a pitch roof measured approximately between 17 feet to 18 feet, 8 inches in height. The entrance to the proposed detached ADU faces the public street, Downington Avenue. In addition, the patio area would be approximately 1 feet 8 inches below the established grade. So the parking for the existing house is accommodated by 2 off-street parking spaces within the attached garage, and 2 additional parking spaces are available on the existing driveway. The parking space for the proposed detached ADU would be legally located on-street along Downington Avenue. The subject property is also located within a quarter mile of a transit stop, with the nearest bus stops located on 1900 South between Logan Avenue and 17 South. The photographs shown here, shown at the top 2, are the proposed location of the ADU, where you see the green screen fencing would be removed in the shed. This is in the northeast corner. And the bottom photographs are from street view. From the bottom left, you'll see kind of the existing garage to your left, and you can slightly see the adjacent property house to the right. And behind the trees and the low fence is where the proposed ADU would be. And then the bottom right would be on the east, standing on the east side of the property and facing towards the property. As you can see, the existing garage is what has the solar power panels. A key issue has been identified through an analysis of the project, where the standard only allows 1 accessory dwelling unit per lot, as shown in the zoning ordinance here. City may only permit 1 accessory dwelling for each lot that contains a single family dwelling. Staff received several comments from neighbors that the applicant currently has an illegal dwelling unit in the basement. The basement level has a kitchen, a living room, a basement, a closet space, and bathroom. As shown here, the basement level shares an entrance into the building with the main floor, and also has a door with the locking hardware at the top and the bottom of the stairs between the basement area and the main floor. The improvements to the basement were completed in 2013. There is no fire separation between the basement level and the main floor, and the fire alarm system is hardwired as a single system throughout the entire home. Furnace and AC are a single unit, as the basement does not have a separate system and is not independently controlled. There has been 2 housing and zoning enforcement cases reported for an illegal dwelling on the subject property. The first Hayes Housing and Zoning Enforcement case was reported in 2014, was initiated by a complainant who noticed a sign out front indicating an in-law apartment for rent. The second case was reported earlier this year, which was prompted by concerns that an ADU unit is being requested when an additional dwelling unit already exists in the basement. The Hayes cases were closed upon verification of the use as a single-family dwelling by 1, verifying the number of tenants meet the definition of family as defined in the zoning ordinance, and 2, verifying the absence of a locking hardware on doors between the basement area and main floors or remains free-flowing. And currently, the basement is being rented out to an individual. Staff acknowledged that previous interpretation on what constitutes a separate dwelling unit would imply that the existing single-family home does not contain an illegal basement apartment. It is a challenge to enforce a situation where the zoning and building regulations do not prohibit an additional dwelling or additional kitchen in a dwelling. So these are the definitions that provides clarification on what constitutes a single-family dwelling. As we see here, single-family dwelling is a detached building containing only one dwelling unit. In essence, kind of highlighting in yellow here is all living areas of a single-family dwelling shall be accessible and occupied by the entire family. And below we see definitions of family of different types of groups or ranges, but ultimately, as long as you meet within those parameters, but living together as a single housekeeping unit and a dwelling unit is consistent throughout. And lastly, the definition of a dwelling ultimately is a building or portion thereof, which is designated for a residential purpose of a family. That is a self-contained unit with a kitchen and bathroom facilities. So in reviewing, staff acknowledged that in reviewing the basement floor plans and current use of the above mentioned definitions, the basement could be considered an additional dwelling unit. During the zoning enforcement process, the property owner showed that there is a free flow, in other words, no locked doors between the alleged separate unit and the main unit, and that the occupant conforms to the zoning definition of family. Therefore, the city determined that the structure on the property is considered a single-family dwelling. But when we look at the ADU definition, you can see here, it's a housekeeping unit with a shared or separate entrance and contains a kitchen, sleeping area, closet space, and bathroom facilities. The basement of the subject home meets this definition. Therefore, staff contends that the basement currently functions as an ADU. And as mentioned, the zoning ordinance limits the number of ADU on a property to 1. And it's staff's opinion that the basement of the home currently functions as an ADU. Therefore, the request does not meet the basic zoning criteria to receive an approval for an ADU. A complete analysis of the findings for the zoning analysis standards for the ADU conditional uses are found in attachment F and G of the staff report, but the proposed attached ADU generally meets the dimensional and design regulations. However, it's in staff's review of the basement level according to the applicant, city records, and zoning ordinance definition. It is determined that the basement of the single-family dwelling functions as an ADU. So based on that, it is determined that the ADU does not meet the general requirements applicable to all the ADU that places a limit of 1 ADU per lot. The proposed use is consistent with goals and policies to creating a diverse housing stock. However, allowing an additional unit would be inconsistent with the intent of the R17,000 single-family residential district and the Sugar House Master Plan, which is within the low-density residential, to preserve and protect the dominant single-family character of the existing low-density residential neighborhoods. So the proposed ADU use is a detached residential unit that should be readily compatible with surrounding neighborhood uses, which are all single-family homes. So the proposed ADU meets the requirements in terms of setback and separation requirements between adjacent houses and principal dwellings on the property, but it does not meet the general requirement for an ADU that limits 1 per lot. Staff received several public comments during the early noticing period, which generally in opposition for the following reasons. First being the alleged use of the principal basement as a separate dwelling unit. 2, the proximity of the proposed ADU to adjacent property lines. The third being proposed 2-story ADU is out of character with the surrounding 1-story single-family dwellings. And 4th, the privacy concerns from adjacent property owners. And lastly, the impact on the existing limited on-street parking. The Sugar House Community Council did hold a land use and community committee meeting on January 13th, and they have provided their recommendation, which their concern is the spirit of the ADU is being violated if the basement apartment in the house and the ADU are being allowed to coexist on this property. 4 additional public comments were received after the staff report was published. 2 were emails, which has been forwarded to the commissioners, and 2 phone calls, all of which were in opposition of the project. With that being said, based on the findings and information in the staff report, staff is recommending denial for the proposed conditional use request. This concludes my presentation.
Thank you, Linda. Any questions for staff at this point? Okay, I don't see any. Then I understand the applicant is here.
Yes.
Okay.
Hi, I am Susan Klinker. I am the homeowner and applicant. Thank you for reviewing my application. I am very proud to present a high-quality ADU proposal that embraces so many of the city's goals for more equitable, diverse, and sustainable housing in the city. I am disappointed with the position of the staff report, and I feel that it contradicts current practice of multiple regulating departments within the city. The staff position that I already have a functioning accessory dwelling unit is technically hearsay and has no basis for actual follow-through with licensing or enforcement as a legal rentable dwelling unit within the city. Currently, I share my single-family dwelling with a roommate with no lock separation restricting flow within the household. My home is owner-occupied both upstairs and downstairs in accordance with definitions of family in the city code and also in the Utah code. This has been twice confirmed by the city's civil enforcement department with records clearly stating that inspections verify use as single-family dwelling. So homeowners can have up to 3 unrelated people living in their homes. Single-family dwellings are permitted to have multiple kitchens and bathrooms. My home is designed for flexibility. I am a single female head of household, and like thousands of other people in the city, I choose to legally share my home with another adult who is not related to me. If I applied with city planning and zoning for an ADU approval of my existing basement today, it would be denied as not meeting the standards. If I applied for a business license with the city today to rent my basement as a separate dwelling, it would also be denied as non-compliant. There's no separate entrance, no lock, no vertical or horizontal fire separation, no separation of alarm systems or heating systems or thermostats or fire dampers, no independent water heater, no separate sewer clean out, no separate shutoffs for gas or water or electric disconnects. There's no separate units. We simply share one single family dwelling, including our single address and mailbox, our Wi-Fi and washer and dryer, and the duties of housekeeping like snow removal and taking out the trash. From my first inquiries with the city, I've fully disclosed that I share my home. My due diligence process all along the way has clarified that as long as I've not changed the status of my home as a single family dwelling, my property would still be eligible for an attached ADU. So Civil Enforcement Officer Julie Lepore inspected my home in January, and her report confirmed that my home is consistent with regulations for single-family dwellings, and no license is required for me to have a roommate in my home. I submitted the grandma records of her file as well as Carol Gent's 2014 report confirming the same. On March 9th, 5 months into my application process, Wayne Mills presented the concept to me for the first time that he was interpreting my application as non-compliant on the basis that I already had a functioning separate dwelling unit in my property. This opposed everything else that I had learned from others in 3 different city departments over the previous year. So that week, I went back and met with planning and zoning staff, Scott Browning and Greg Mikolash, his supervisor. And once again, they confirmed to me that I am allowed to share my home with up to 3 unrelated people, so long as no locks restrict flow and it does not change the status of my home as a single-family dwelling. They also pointed out that if my 2013 construction permit for basement renovations had triggered a change in the status of my home to a duplex, it would have been rejected as illegal. So it didn't, and permitting by the city suggests that it is fully compliant with regulations for single-family dwellings. So that same week, I also went back to tenant landlord licensing and spoke with Melinda Daybell, who also confirms that existing conditions at my property are not eligible for application as a licensed independent dwelling, but are fully allowable as an unlicensed shared household. On March 11th, the Planning Commission approved an ADU application where the applicant confirmed that he regularly rents 3 rooms within his home through Airbnb and wanted a separate additional modular ADU for use and turnkey rental. Another application on February 26th, at the February 26th meeting, included neighbors' comments that the owner was also renting 3 rooms within his home. Nightly rentals are not legal in Salt Lake City, and both applications were opposed by neighbors, and both were still recommended by staff for approval. So I'm wondering why my application is being considered so differently. I've reviewed online records from all previous ADU applications since the ordinance was approved. There's been about 15. Mine is the first to include planning staff requests for interior layout of my single-family dwelling and explanations of relationships and flow within my home. It's also the first to be recommended for denial. I've put a lot of effort and time and money into my ADU proposal over the last year, as well as a lot of my heart. During that time, I've received clear and consistent input from city staff across 3 departments that conditions in my home are compliant with single-family dwellings and not compliant as multifamily. The staff report introduces a new interpretation of a definition in the city code that directly contradicts ongoing practice of city enforcement and zoning, and sets a fuzzy precedent for bringing all kinds of other factors into equitable analysis of future ADU applications. The city has thousands of homes where diverse, unrelated people live in non-traditional settings under one roof, with a wide range of architectural layout and human dynamics in place. The city has thousands of homes with multiple kitchens and interiors like mine. This new staff interpretation does not redefine pre-existing in my home as already having a separate and legal residential unit. It applies an inappropriate label using a definition that is inconsistent with current city ongoing regulations. So physical conditions at my home do meet the legal definitions of a single-family dwelling and do not meet the legal definitions for an existing ADU or a duplex. This new interpretation has no footing or consistency moving forward, and I feel that it will significantly complicate the ADU review process if subjective judgments about layouts and behaviors within a main home become the new norm. I was told that there are at least 64 applications in the review process now, and clearly they all need to be considered on the same footing. So I thank you for deeply considering my perspective and my history on the process. And Soren Simonson has been working with me on developing this project over the past year, and I would like for him to also share some of his perspectives on the bigger picture.
We are running a little bit out of time, so let me first ask the commission if they have questions.
Yeah, just staff real quick. Sorry, is that okay?
Well, let's ask questions for the applicant at the moment, if you want, and then we'll go back to staff if that's okay.
I have a question for the applicant.
Okay.
Thank you for your presentation of your ADU. I was curious, would you consider perhaps, what I see from the plans, it's a two-story a building, it's a two-story structure. Have you considered doing something less elaborate, perhaps a one-story structure? Has that crossed perhaps your ideas as you went through this process?
So yes, but because my lot is a corner lot, I am restricted to front yard setbacks on both streets. So my buildable area is very small in the back corner of my yard. So I did, in response to neighbors' comments about the two-story structure, I did propose I drafted a proposed alternate and shared it with with all of the attendees at the community council meeting. But I only got one positive comment that that would appease anybody's concerns about the ADU. So it would significantly reduce the size of the living space to under 300 square feet. So, so I disregarded that study.
Okay, and one last question. What's your plan as far as the use for the ADU?
To accommodate my changing family, I have 2 teenage boys that'll be going off to college in a couple years. It may be available for them. I might consider living in the ADU myself and making my whole house available for rental, or I may consider rental. I have no intention for nightly rentals with the ADU.
Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any other questions for the applicant? Okay. Wayne, do you know, is there any of the 10 minutes allotted? Is there any time left?
I actually did not have a timer running on that, so it might be fair to allow the applicants assistant to get a couple of minutes.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yes. A few minutes, and then we'll move to the public hearing portion. Thanks.
Linda, if you could stop sharing your screen, and I'm going to move it down to Soren.
Okay.
Thank you. Can you hear me okay?
Yes. Thank you.
Great. Thank you very much.
Just a second here, Soren.
And while you swap out the screen sharing, let me just say my relationship is I happen to be a neighbor and a friend of Susan. Our kids go to or went to elementary school together at Dilworth, and we've crossed paths as professionals. Susan has a background in design and architecture, which I do as well. So I'm here mostly as a friend, but have been advising Susan going through this process. So let me quickly share my screen. I'm not going to go through this entire presentation, but I want to just touch on a couple of, I think, important points related to overarching city policy. First of all, the city has been giving very consistent messages for well over a decade that we have a housing crisis, we have an air quality and climate crisis, we have major environmental challenges and major social equity concerns. And the city needs property owners like Susan to help accomplish major goals. I want to just quickly note something from the Sugar House Master Plan from 2005. There is significant policy discussion in the master plan indicating a desire to not convert single family homes into multiple units. And in fact, the city staff has, as part of their staff report, effectively said that she has multiple units, although other city departments have clearly stated that it's a single family home. To convert the home into multiple units would clearly be contrary to adopted policy in the Sugar House Master Plan. There's also a lot of discussion about accessory dwelling units, and clearly the process by which this accessory dwelling unit ordinance was created by Salt Lake City had mixed reviews, and we hear that not only in the comments today about Susan's unit, but we hear them consistently. I happen to serve on a Sugar House Community Council committee, and we reviewed 5 applications on Monday at our Community Council committee meeting, and we heard similar comments. There's a lot of concern by many people about what accessory dwelling units might do to communities. I won't go into detail on any of these. It's already included in the owner's statement in your staff report, but from neighborhoods to growth and development of the city to housing policy to air quality and beautiful city comments, this property owner is very consistently trying to follow the guidance that the city has provided. I do want to just touch very briefly on an important equity concern, and that is there's been a lot of unusual excitement and controversy around this and a number of other dwelling units. Growing pains come with change, and there are many people concerned about how their neighborhood characters might alter with new accessory units being added. But the city needs partners like this owner to meet its intentions and the policies it desires to create for a livable and resilient community, which is the vision for Salt Lake City. And the Planning Commission needs to have her back. This project is an opportunity to advocate for equitable private property rights. Susan lives in a non-traditional household, and so she has a home that looks different than mine with a traditional family structure. But we need to advocate for people that they also have property rights, even in non-traditional households. We need to educate for non-discrimination, equity, and respect to what a diverse community looks like. And we need to demonstrate how we accomplish the city's goals and objectives to create a city that works for everyone. Linda already touched on the accessible dwelling unit ordinance and some of the specifics. I want to just point out one thing before I close, and that is the staff seems to be looking at one specific piece of the definition for an accessible dwelling unit, and that is defining a housekeeping unit as being a separate kitchen, sleeping area, closet space, and bathrooms. But if you look carefully at the definition of an accessible dwelling unit ordinance, it's a complete housekeeping unit, and by complete, I think that means that it is completely separate, which Susan's single-family home is clearly not. But it also uses and a separate kitchen, sleeping area, closet space, and bathroom. So in order to be something other than a single-family dwelling, she would need to meet the and of that definition. And clearly it's not a complete housekeeping unit. What she has with her roommate, the relationship with her roommate, who predominantly uses the basement, but can come and go throughout the house. And yes, it has those separate facilities, but it's not a separate housekeeping unit. And the city has consistently said this is not an attached dwelling unit. It is simply part of the same unit. It meets all of the definitions of a single-family dwelling, including accessible and occupied by the entire family, which is as important as the previous definition. And finally, what is a family? A family can be a group of not more than 3 persons not related by blood. So as long as that family has access to the entire unit, unrestricted access, her house is a single-family dwelling by every definition of what dwellings are and the specific types of dwelling. And therefore, this property owner should be allowed an ADU, just like any other property owner is allowed an ADU under the ordinance. So I just want to reiterate, there's really consistent messages. Susan is doing an incredible job of trying to create a model and prototype for a net zero type of accessory dwelling unit, which is really unique among all of the accessory dwelling units I've seen in the city. And I would hope that this becomes a model for others to follow, and we would love to have your support.
Great, thank you. Any other questions from the commission for the applicant? Okay. Matt, do you want to ask your question now for staff?
I'm still stewing on it.
Okay, well, we can do some more. We'll now go ahead to the public hearing portion. I'll open the public hearing. Wayne, is there anyone here from the community council who would like to speak?
I do not see a community council person. I would ask anybody who's in attendance if you would please raise your hand. And I don't see anybody from the community council.
Okay.
Actually, I do have one hand raised. Zachary. Zach, I don't think Zach represents the community council, but I will move him over, but maybe in the meantime, I know that we've had a couple of emails come in that people would like to put on the record. So while I move Zach over, if maybe John could read those emails into the record as part of the public record, if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, I can do that. I have two of them, so let me get to the right spot. All right, so this is the first one. Says we are writing in regard to the Clinker ADU at 1807 South, 1900 East. Clinker residence already has an ADU in the basement, a full apartment with kitchen, bath, bedroom, living room, and entry. We are adamantly opposed to this ADU for the additional following reasons. One, does not fit in with scale and appearance of neighborhood as all homes are one story on street. ADU guidelines require 17-foot high maximum with a 10-foot setback for a second floor. Proposed ADU does not meet this. Architect's drawings do not show contacts with surrounding structures. Number two, all homes currently have off-street parking. Three, there is currently a minimum of 40 feet between neighboring home bedrooms. This is comprised of 20 feet exterior space plus 20 feet interior space. Four, proposed ADU, it decreases home values on street. Five, all adjacent neighbors have expressed opposition to proposed ADU. Makes for poor neighbor relationships. Six, proposed ADU more negatively affects neighbors with decrease in value, distance of 14 feet from our bedroom as opposed to 40 feet from Clinker's bedroom. Sight, sound, smell, then Clinker residence. Number seven, exterior sprinkling of building needs to be addressed due to proximity of neighboring structures. This ADU ordinance was apparently passed without much input from voters. The conditional use permit process should not inherently point towards approval. Thank you. And this is from Liz Josephson and Mike Becker. I have one more to read. It says, hello, we are neighbors that would be impacted by the proposed conditional use dwelling property. We oppose the proposed construction due to increased traffic, more congestion for parking, increased rental traffic as opposed to owner traffic, among others. We cannot attend the public hearing, but wanted to voice these concerns. Kind regards. That's from Laura W. And those are the two emails I've received today.
Great, thank you, John. Okay, is Zach queued up to talk?
He is queued up now to talk.
Okay, Zach, you'll state your name. You'll have 2 minutes.
Hi, Zachary Dussault, speaking in favor of the project. And I just want to clarify, I'm not a representative of the community council. I just want to speak in favor of this project because I feel like the staff's recommendation sets a precedent in this case. Either the applicant is currently operating an illegal ADU, which Housing and Zoning Enforcement has already twice said that that is not the case, and or there would be 2 ADUs on the property. So the staff's recommendation that the current basement is considered an ADU would not be consistent with Housing and Zoning Enforcement's already twice reconfirmed interpretation of this property. So the main basis for staff's negative recommendation on the application doesn't really hold up under that context. And there are going to be some people that are just against ADUs in all forms and all shapes and sizes, and will find whatever they can to try and get a specific one denied because they believe that their property value is going to be affected. They believe that traffic is going to be worse. But in this case, there's 4 off-street parking spaces. So parking is not really an issue on this site. I know the proposed plan does show the legal space as being on street, but with 4 parking spaces and with a max of maybe like, I don't know, 4 or 5 people on the property, I don't really see that being an issue. And I'd also, again, just like to remind the Planning Commission that they don't just represent neighbors in the proximity that receive a notice that a big, scary 2-story building is coming up next to the property. They also represent the city as a whole and renters and people who would like to be able to buy a house someday and would like to live in a livable city. Thanks, that's it.
All right, thank you, Zach. Okay. We have any other individuals indicating they wish to speak?
I do not see any additional hands raised. It is interesting, we received, I know one other email from an individual today who said that they would like to speak at the meeting tonight, but I am not seeing that individual here, so I'm hoping that folks didn't have an issue getting into the meeting, but I don't see anyone else that wishes to speak.
Okay. And there are no additional emails to read into the record?
No.
Yeah, there are no others.
Okay.
If there are people listening, it isn't too late to send an email. We just obviously would clearly like to receive them sooner rather than later.
Okay. Well, with that, I will go ahead and close the public hearing and bring the discussion back to the commission, as well as, well, let me first let the applicant respond to any of the questions. I'll give you another minute or two if you want to address any of the issues that were raised in the public comment.
No, but I do have a question, if that's okay. And that is, if my kids slept in the room downstairs, would that change the city staff's perspective? Or if my father is staying in the room downstairs, would that change city's definition of my having or suggesting that I have an ADU already in my lower level? So if my roommate who's downstairs traded rooms with my boys, would that have an impact on this decision?
We'll bring that question to the commission and back to staff. Okay. So now let's bring this back to the commission. Is there any questions for staff at the moment?
Yeah, I've got 2 questions. I think I've got it. So one, I guess for Paul, this term that's in the code, complete housekeeping unit, is a odd phrase. Like, no one speaks that way. It seems like that should have there's a clear reason why someone has used that phrase, complete housekeeping unit. Is there anything that adds clarity to what that definition means? I mean, I could not find it in city code anywhere else. I mean, it's a couple of other places. There's one place that talks about cooking, but it's not really clear. And the Google search seems like there's a couple of cities that have sought to define that. I'm just wondering where that phrase came from, if you know.
Personally, I don't. Wayne may have a better idea. As far as when we have a term that's not necessarily clear, we do our best to have the zoning administrator or their designee interpret that term. And in this case,
It's chosen in the writing of the code, I guess is my point. Like, it's not a common thing you hear. Someone chose that.
right, and the courts, when they look at our code language, they say that each term was used advisedly. So we had some specific intent when we used that term. Maybe what Wayne has a thought on that.
Yeah, my thought on it, in just reading through that definition, is it goes along with the kitchen, sleeping area, closet space, and bathroom facilities.
But you don't need, the second part of the sentence is you don't need to say complete housing unit. You could skip over that word. Say accessory dwelling unit has the following.
Yeah.
I mean, complete housing unit clearly is intended to have a definition.
Yeah, and I believe it.
Okay.
The way that it was written was basically to kind of say that you don't have to go outside of that space to get something you need to live. And so the kitchen, sleeping area, closet space, bathroom facilities, that kind of reinforces what that, in my mind, that reinforces what that complete housekeeping unit means.
Okay, and then my question for, I think for Linda, or staff as well. I mean, this project really seems to hinge on the existence of the separate kitchen, closet, and bathroom potentially, right? It seems to hinge largely on the existence of a separate kitchen and bathroom, when otherwise it would just be a room and a basement. Is that correct?
That's correct.
And then, in that context, did we ever review the other projects? Because I remember being frustrated with a guy renting out a bunch of rooms and was one of the people that was not, a fan of, he was renting out the rooms and also putting accessory building in. It was like just another rental. But did we ever review those other homes that came through, or looked at other homes in an ADU application process to see if they had separate kitchens? I do know in this neighborhood having a separate kitchen or a basement apartment is super common. It's shocking how many people have that. And it's weird that they do. I'm not sure that they should have them, because probably a lot of them aren't conforming. But did we ever look at if there were separate kitchens in other proposals that came before us or not?
No, and typically we don't. We don't ask for the the floor plans of individual houses. Like if somebody was to come in and do, a detached ADU, we wouldn't say, well, give us the floor plan of your house. In this case, what happened was we had received public comment that the neighbors had thought that there was already an existing legal basement apartment. So that led us to, that's all part of this process, is when we receive public comment, we need to explore that. We need to find out, what's going on with that. So as we were doing our analysis and looked into it, we did find that there's an enforcement case, and the enforcement officer was able to take photos, which then led to the investigation. So in this case, we did find those, find out that information. It was just based on what we received through the public comment period.
Right, but we received similar public comment too from people saying, "Oh, those guys are renting out rooms in this house," or, but okay, that's okay. This is a hard one. All right, thanks.
So I have a question for staff as well, which is, it's fair to say that, I'm asking whether it's fair to say that one of the reasons that this applicant's being questioned more than others who have also been accused of having in-home units is that there were complaints from the neighborhood.
Yeah, correct. Yeah. It was something that led us to look into it further. Yes. And this one, I think it was a little different than, you know, when folks, we get those complaints a lot. Oh, there's rooms being rented out. And I think that's a little different scenario than when somebody comes to us and says, we think that there's a full basement apartment in this building, in this home. So that's what led us to look into it. And in fact, there was actually zoning enforcement cases on it.
Okay. We don't typically look for zoning enforcement cases when we look at ADUs. That's not part of our standard checklist.
No, not typically.
Okay.
Would the basement area otherwise qualify as an ADU? Does it meet the other standards in the code for being an ADU?
I can answer that one. Based on the footprint of the home and the standard of the ADU when it's within a home, it could only be 50% of the gross principal building, excluding the garage, unless it's right below the garage. In this case, the existing basement area would exceed that 50%.
So then it wouldn't, if she were to submit an application for the basement, it wouldn't meet the standards for being an ADU.
Just for the footprint, exceeding the footprint.
Is that because you're including the utility room?
No, I am not including the utility room. So I strictly calculated based on the enclosed door and the rest of that living, the kitchen, the bath, so kind of where you saw the doors closing off to that space.
I have a question for the applicant. Is the laundry shared or is that separate? Are there two laundry rooms or one laundry room?
No, the laundry room is shared. And since the staff report came out, I have done an analysis of a budget estimate on the construction that would be required to bring my existing space up to the ADU standards. And I estimate that it would be about $60,000. And all those things that I listed in my previous narrative would have to be included. Fire separation, both vertical and horizontal, a separate water heater unit, separate fire alarms. You know, it goes on and on. So, yeah.
Okay. Any other questions for staff? Any discussion among the commissioners?
I just have a comment. I think the main issue is just the oddness of having two kitchens in a single family home. But in theory, because the laundry separation doesn't exist, their hot water heater doesn't exist, the fire separations, the things that require, you know, to create this as a legal dwelling unit don't really exist other than there being two kitchens and being able to possibly, I mean, really the risk is having an illegal dwelling unit is really the biggest risk of putting a lock back on the door, which would be pretty simple. But as long as the rules, and that seems to me like more of a code enforcement, you know, issue, where if there's more than 3 people living in that property that aren't related, then that's really the issue that we're concerned about, and that's not really our side of things. That's my point of view. But yeah.
Yeah, I think that I have to agree with you, John. It feels like it should be an ADU, but if it doesn't otherwise meet the requirements of being an ADU, I don't know how we can say it is and it isn't in the same breath.
I agree. I think we had the neighbors alerted us to something, and the city went to check it out, and It doesn't sound like they're coming back saying it's absolutely an ADU, you know, so I don't know how we can hold them to those standards when our own compliance department can't say definitively that this is the case. I mean, I personally have lived in multiple houses with multiple kitchens, and I don't, if people were starting to call me out on that, that would be very, very weird. So I don't, you know, some houses are built that way, thinking of multiple configurations of families. So I agree with Jonathan and Adrian.
I think that is an interesting argument the city's making. Clearly, one of the problems that we have with these ADUs is when we have one person renting out a bunch of rooms and then also adding an ADU just to rent out another room. That's the bad actors that we have, and then we've seen them come through, and we haven't been able to really address those very well. Going back to my one where the guy was putting a thing above a garage and he didn't even know the names of the people that lived in the house with him. Right? I mean, it was like, it just was like.
I remember that.
And so I think this conversation that the city's using or looking at this question of separate kitchens or additional rentals that really are separate sort of spaces in existing homes is an interesting one and one that should be explored. I do think we should be looking at that definition of housing units or housekeeping units a little bit more definitively. But then I'm trying to weigh that against, I think, this applicant really is not being treated fairly with the way we've treated every other applicant that's come through this process, the way we've looked at all these other similar projects where they've got rentals in the house, and we let them go through whether we like them or not, just because that was the way that we were required in the ordinance. And this applicant, because she was honest and said there is a kitchen, is why she's being punished for being straightforward and honest rather than being just kind of tucking under the rug like other ones have gone through. So I'm trying to weigh that and figure out that's where I'm at with it.
Wayne, wasn't there a requirement in the AD ordinance that the city revisit the ordinance within a certain time frame of its adoption?
We are required by ordinance to report back to the city council and provide numbers and issues with the ordinance, and we have a list of those issues. We did that. We provided that back to the city council. We do recognize that there are some things that need to be fixed. There's some things that need to be clarified. And we know that does need to occur. It's on the list of many, many amendments to our ordinance that need to be done.
So that you've already reported back to the council that requirement and that, okay.
We're required to do it at the end of the year, basically.
Okay. Any other discussion among commission? Is anybody willing to entertain a motion?
Okay.
Thank you, Brenda.
I'm going to move to approve this. And I'm doing so because I believe that it is consistent with the spirit of the ADU law, which basically says, if it meets these conditions, then we should approve it. And I think it's important for everyone listening to understand that we are required to approve something which meets the conditions. And the only condition that this does not meet, according to staff, is one which the Planning Commission is questioning quite severely. And I agree with that questioning. So based on the findings listed in the staff report, the information presented and input received during the public hearing, I move that the Planning Commission approve the conditional use request for an accessory dwelling unit subject to the following conditions. 1, subject to the compliance with all department division comments and conditions as noted in attachment 1. 2, the property owner shall comply with the registration process as outlined in section 21A.40.200F of the Salt Lake City zoning ordinance.
Second.
Motion by Brenda, second, sorry, who did the second? John?
John.
Okay, second by John. Let's run through, let's start with John.
Yes.
Okay, Brenda?
Yes.
Crystal?
Yes.
Sarah?
Yes.
Andres?
Yay.
Matt?
Yeah, I'm gonna say yes, and just for the record, I think from my broken down is the shared utilities, the shared laundry room, the lack of a lock, and the city kind of inspecting and not deeming it separate units is what I'm making my decision around. So if we do this again, those are things that they're looking for. So yes.
Thank you. Amy?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Okay. Motion passes unanimously. The application was approved. All right, thank you for your time and for your bearing with us during our virtual planning commission.
Thank you.
Smooth as they normally run, but we're working through. Okay, item number 4 on our agenda, plan development for Sydney and Slate at approximately 906 South, 200 West. Case number PLN 2018-00869. And Sarah will be giving us a staff report.
Sarah, you now have control. Sarah, are you there?
Wayne, you gave the control to the wrong Sarah.
Thank you. This is Sarah Urquhart.
Yeah.
Sorry about that.
You're gonna have to change one of your names.
You're not the first one.
Okay.
All right, are we ready now?
There you go, Sarah. Sorry about that.
Okay.
I'm gonna have to call one of you Larry.
All right, so thank you. As mentioned, this is a plan development for Sydney and Slate. It's a proposal for 2 buildings. The location is shown in the aerial photograph. The properties are located on the south side of 900 South between 200 West and Washington Street. A public alley is located between the 2 buildings. The property and the adjacent properties are zoned FBUN2. Slate is the building that's located to the west, and then Sydney is the building that's located to the east. Both buildings are proposed to be 65 feet tall. The maximum height for the Slate site was increased to 65 feet through a previous text amendment that was approved by the City Council last year. The Slate building proposes 150 units, most 1-bedroom units, approximately 3,500 square feet of commercial space and 58 parking spaces, and it wraps an existing building at 227 West, 900 South. Sydney is located to the east and is also diagonally across the street from the 200 West, 900 South track station. It is also proposed to be 65 feet tall with 125 units, approximately 5,000 square feet of commercial space, and nearly 100 parking spaces. The applicant is requesting relief from a number of standards. They are building entries every 75 feet, ground floor transparency of at least 60%, ground floor uses other than parking occupying at least 75% of the street frontage, street level facing facades of the parking structure wrapped with habitable space, and facade length in excess of 200 feet. And these requests are primarily due to environmental contamination that originates from a former dry cleaning operation that was located on the site where Sydney is proposed at 906 South, 200 West. The applicant has submitted a remedial action plan, which is attachment I in the staff report, that details how the contamination affects the site and how it affects the adjacent properties as well. The environmental remediation that is planned by the applicant will be to US EPA standards that do not allow for residential uses on the first floor. And as such, the applicant proposes a mix of parking and commercial uses for the first floor. And the location of the parking conflicts with several of the standards, which I'll talk more about in subsequent slides. So this rendering shows primarily Slate on the corner and then Sydney to the east. I'm going to go ahead and talk about the Slate site first. It shows the existing conditions with the view on 900 South at the top left, and then the other two photographs show the existing two houses that are located on Washington Street that would be demolished. And then on 900 South, you can see the former Chuckles building and then the duplex on the corner. And then the proposed Slate building would wrap that central water building in the center of the photo. And so this is the site plan for the first floor of Slate. You can see how that building wraps the existing building that's on 900 South. The applicant has commercial space fronting 900 South, and then much of the rest of the first floor is occupied by parking. The parking would be accessed from an entrance on Washington Street that is located towards the rear of the facade. This is the 900 South facade, and it shows that the material proposed for the first floor is black brick. The red material is also brick, and then the gray on the upper levels is fiber cement lap siding. And you can see additional information about the materials on page 60 of the staff report, which shows the material board. So on the Washington Street facade, I'm sorry, this is the facade that has most of the requests for modifications. The primary materials on the building on this facade are the same as the 900 South facade. The first four requests for the plan development relate to the transparency and ground floor uses. And as outlined earlier, the remediation that the applicant anticipates completing would not allow for habitable spaces on the first floor, but there would be residential units on the upper floors. So the first request is for the distance between building entries. You can see this location is shown in blue. The use behind this stand is parking, and rather than require another door to the garage, staff and the applicant work to address other issues that relate to the intent of the standard, and then to address the distance between entries and also ground floor transparencies, work on a combination of wall murals, which are shown in the yellow, and then metal mesh, which is shown in orange, that would break up the length of the facade, provide visual interest, and then meet the intent of the standard. The location of the parking relates to the other two requests. Ground floor uses other than parking must occupy over 75% of the street frontage, and also that the street level facing facade of the parking structure must be wrapped with habitable space. Staff supported these requests since the commercial space along the entire frontage of Washington Street would be unlikely to be viable and will not require. There were concerns with lack of parking in the neighborhood, and there is likely to be a demand for parking from the potential tenants. The final request is for a facade length that exceeds 200 feet. The proposed facade length is 227 feet, which is about 13% in excess of the permitted length. This is not a significant increase, and it is staff's opinion that the building form is consistent with that desired by the underlying zone, which encourages small setbacks, and also maximizing use of the site since it's in an area that is heavily served by rail and bus, as well as on the 9-line trail. So these are the two facades that face public streets. The other facades are also shown in the staff report, and I can bring those up if you want me to. For the Sydney site, these photographs show the existing conditions on the site. The photograph on the top left shows the former dry cleaner site from 900 South. The photograph below it shows the site from 200 West. And then the photograph on the left shows the parking that's located to the rear of the building, along with an apartment building that's located to the south of the site. This is the site plan for the Sydney site. It shows the commercial uses fronting 900 South and extending along part of the 200 West frontage. Much of the first floor is occupied by parking. The parking is accessed from an entrance on 200 West that is located towards the rear of the facade. And then on the 900 South elevation, the first floor has a significant amount of glass along with metal panels. And then the upper levels are predominantly brick. And then the material board for that showing additional information is on page 61. And then for the 200 West facade, the primary materials are similar to the 900 South facade. There's a large area in the center that's devoted to the wall mural. And then there's fiber cement lap siding proposed to the left of it in this area here. And similar to Slate, the requests for relief are located on the secondary facade, and the first floor are related to transparency and ground floor uses. The first request is for the distance between building entries. There are 2 areas where this span between the entrances is 75 feet, which is the span to the north in the commercial space and has
Sarah, you're breaking up on us.
Can't hear you, Sarah.
We lost you after band.
After?
You were talking about bands.
Okay. Can you hear me again?
Yes.
Okay. Bands. Spans probably.
Spans. Could be.
Spans. Okay. So there's 2 spans where the distance between the entrances is greater than 75 feet, and that's shown in blue on the slide. The span to the north is a commercial space that has the potential for another entry. And then additionally, there's likely to be a use in that area that would provide pedestrian interest. And then the glass provides safety and additional visual interest as well. And then the second span is located to the south, and the use behind it is parking. And similar to the Slate building, to address the intent of the requirement and the requirement for ground floor transparency, in this area, the applicant is breaking up the facade and providing visual interest through a combination of windows and wall murals. So wall murals are the areas that are shown in white there. There is also an additional large mural, I mentioned that earlier, near the center of the structure that extends the full height of it. So the location of the parking relates to the other requests. The requirement is that the ground floor uses other than parking must occupy over 75% of the street frontage, and then that the street level facing facades of the parking structure must be wrapped with habitable space. And so staff and the applicant work together to increase the commercial area to a length of approximately 85 feet, which is greater than what was originally proposed. This is in this general area here. It was identified in the staff report. And this increase, combined with the challenges of remediating the site and the visual elements on the wall murals, meet the intent of the standards in staff's opinion. And the final request is for a facade length that exceeds 200 feet. The proposed facade length is 238 feet, which is about 19% in excess of the permitted length. And this is not a significant increase, and it is staff's opinion that the building form is consistent with that desired by the underlying zone, with a small setback and the way that it maximizes the use of the site, and especially since it's in an area that's heavily served by rail and bus as well as on the 9-line trail. And so as far as public comment, staff received comments from the community council, which were generally supportive and were included in the staff report attachments. And staff also received a public comment from an area resident that was also included in the staff report. This individual had concerns with the lack of active floor uses and parking on the ground level and recommended considering elevated townhouses. An open house was held, and a few individuals provided some general comments, which are also summarized in the staff report. Staff and the applicant did not attend a community council meeting to discuss the project. And so based on the information in the staff report, planning staff recommends approval of the proposal with the conditions listed in the staff report. I want to let you know that the applicant is also here and has a presentation, but at this point wanted to see if there are questions for staff.
Any questions for Sarah?
I've got one. So then I know we did a zoning text change. Didn't we also do a zoning map amendment change on the western lot, or no? Am I just remembering this wrong?
That was the text amendment.
We did not.
Specific.
either?
I'm sorry?
We didn't change the underlying zone either, we just did the text.
Correct. It's these properties and the ones around it are all zoned FBUN too.
And so we didn't change the zoning, we just changed the text. Okay, all right, thank you.
So I have a question, Sarah. And for the record, you did a much better presentation than I could have done. The modifications they're looking for, are those all related to the Sydney building or some of them related to the Slate building?
So they're looking for basically the same modifications on both buildings.
Both buildings?
Right.
Even though the Sydney building's the only one that had the dry cleaning on the property, why are they looking for those same modifications on the Slate building?
I believe the applicant will discuss this, but the contamination went to the other properties as well. So the restrictions for the remediation will apply to the whole site.
Yeah, there's a groundwater plume shown or described in the environmental report that was submitted.
Okay.
For the staff report.
So it's not just on the Sydney side. Okay, thank you. Those are the questions I have for now.
Okay, any other questions for Sarah? No? Okay, we'll hear from the applicant now.
James, I've made you a presenter. You can share your screen now if you'd like. You there, James?
Looks like
Yes, I am
he
here.
Let me know if you have issues with it.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, we can hear
Okay.
you.
Great, I'm just pulling up this file. I'm assuming you all can see that?
Yes.
Okay, great. I'll jump into it. It's good to be in front of you again, back here for Sydney and Slate. Just wanted to start with the site plans showing the first floor and the parking we're providing. When we came in front of you for the height request, there was a lot of neighborhood feedback about the desire for off-street parking. That in this neighborhood, there are a lot of micro units going up that are providing no off-street parking. And it's putting a lot of pressure on the neighborhood. So it gave you a lot of comfort when I explained the fact that we had to come through a plan development and bring this back in front of you. So what you're seeing is pretty similar to what you approved at the height request. But there are a couple changes I'll get into, taking more neighborhood feedback and also planning staff feedback. I just want to reiterate, we would not be here if it wasn't for contamination. What you're seeing in red is the initial parcel that we acquired back in 2017, and the goal is just to redevelop this per zoning. As we got into due diligence, we found that these sites, this site and the sites around it are severely contaminated. These are down gradient from the dry cleaner site to the east, which is Sydney. And so in going through this process, landowners and us were going back and forth about who was going to take over the responsibility for cleanup, and it was clear that these sites were going to be saddled in litigation and contamination for years and years to come. So we decided to take the risk of trying to acquire as much of the contamination that we can. I know the lines are a little faint, but if you could see the plume of the red, green, and purple lines, those all have to deal with dry cleaner solvents that have seeped down and gotten into groundwater and also into soil. And so over 3 years, we've been acquiring as much of the contamination that we can to be able to take all of these sites through a remediation and development process. It's been actually a lot more than we were willing to do at the beginning. So we're trying to make lemonade out of lemons. I mean, these are great sites, but the contamination has just been a real challenge. So just to reiterate, if these sites were not contaminated, we wouldn't be here for the height request or for this plan development. And an example of that is the red star is a block north of another property that we currently own that we're redeveloping. The yellow block represents Sydney and Slate. So just a block away in the same zoning, running 2 street frontages, and we are able to line those with residences. So per zone, we're allowed to build this by right because we don't have contamination, so we don't have limitations of what we can do on the ground floor. So we're lining them with residences, and we don't have to come to the Planning Commission for any sort of variance or exception. So contamination is really the key factor here and what we're trying to deal with. Through the height request process and this process, we've gone to the neighborhood multiple times. For the height variance, we had a letter of support from the Ballpark Community Council and the Central Ninth Community Council. For this, the Ballpark Community Council said that their letter of recommendation doesn't change, and we got an updated one from the Central Ninth Community Council as well. So in this process of dealing with the neighborhood, we really wanted to incorporate what they wanted, their more important things that they wanted to see, while also trying to deal with this contamination. And planning staff has also given us feedback that we've since changed from when you last saw this. One of them, as Sarah mentioned, is extending commercial space along 200 West. So this is the corner of 200 West and 9th South, right at tracks. And we eliminated some off-street parking. But Sarah made a good point that this is a very predominant corner with a lot of visibility. And we thought it made sense to add more commercial here and reduce parking on this site to try to meet the intent of the zoning. We also, on Washington Street, we added a lobby from whence we met with you last. So we have a Washington Street lobby. And as you can see, we have quite a bit of commercial coming down Washington as well. So it's not just a blank wall for 200 some odd feet. We're really trying to activate it as best as we can while providing off-street parking. Now, we're still at a very aggressive ratio. We're still parked at about half a stall per unit. So this is by no means over-parked. We also are very, very interested, and we have a very strong desire to really maximize 900 South and fill in the missing teeth from 9th South and 9th East to 9th South and 9th West, and keep that as a really great commercial street. So to provide all that, all that commercial space and the residences, and to listen to neighborhood concerns, we feel like we've reached a really good balance with off-street parking and also activating the street. You've seen this rendering before. You can see this is Washington and this is Slate. We come down Washington quite a bit, and so we feel like Washington is still represented well. There's still a lot of frontage on Washington, something we feel good about. 900 South is a street where we really want to focus commercial, and then we also want to create a really active, vibrant space in the alley as well, just to along 900 South create a lot of walkability and vibrancy. So that is my presentation, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thank you. Any questions for the applicant? Brenda?
Yeah, James, what is the width of that alley we're looking at right there?
I don't know that off the top of my head. It's unlike most streets it's like most alleys in Salt Lake, and a scale we don't find in a lot of Salt Lake. It's really hard to fit 2 cars down there. I've driven down there a bunch, and it's tight. And so we felt that was a way to, instead of, if you can't hide something, to feature it. And so we felt the scale was something we really wanted to leverage and take advantage of.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Scheer, if I can interrupt, I measured it, it's 17 feet, which is a really common alley width for neighborhoods that were built in this era.
Thank you.
So I have a couple questions. One on the alley, is it just going to dead end?
This alley goes through all the way to Fayette Street. So this is an active alley. Just
Is
like
it
we
an
did with
active
the-
alley
and-
for car access?
It is, yes.
So would you do something on the end of your property to make sure no cars were coming through that, or?
We wouldn't. We're not allowed to do that since the city-owned right-of-way. But what we're interested in doing, we've been involved in this neighborhood for quite a long time. We did this shipping container development called Granary Row, and we just really like this neighborhood. We've been invested for really long, so we're willing to kind of bang our head against the wall and try to figure this contamination out. But something we did there was work closely with the city to create events where, you know, the street or a portion of the street can be shut down during different times where people aren't, you know, driving and accessing it as much, like on weekend nights, where we can pull tables and chairs out and really make it an active space. So that would be a partnership with the city we're looking to work with as we start to program this.
I have one other question. On the entrance issue, are you only facing this issue of an entrance every however many feet on the Washington and Second West? 9th South, you're meeting it fine?
9th South, we're meeting it fine. Yep, we have access is more than 75 feet. We're trying to create smaller scale retail for smaller local businesses to be able to come in and use. So we have entrances. The dimensions are, Sarah might know the dimensions, but they're pretty frequent along 9th South.
So what is your
Much more
rationale
closer than
then,
75 feet.
since you only have retail kind of in the northern part of both of your buildings, what's the rationale for not providing another entrance on Second West and Washington?
So a couple of things. 200 West and Washington Street. Let's 200 West first. 200 West dead ends in about 2 blocks after us. It's not a very highly trafficked or car traffic street. We thought Sarah made a good point about even extending it a little further because it still is on a major corridor, which we thought made sense. 200 West just is not a retail street. And since we can't put residences on the ground floor, we're very limited in what we can do there. It would be very hard for
I guess, let me clarify, James. Let me clarify. So if we forget the southern portion, that's your parking, because of these limitations, and we're only looking at, I'm only looking at the retail portion on the north end of both Sydney and Lake. So I just want to address, like, what's your rationale for not providing an entrance on just that northern portion? I understand the southern end, but I think that they could benefit from another entrance on your retail section.
Now, I guess the reasoning behind that is just how, and we work very closely with KTG, our architect, who just has a lot of experience building this kind of product across the country. And businesses, so we're taking a risk already in the alley. We have 2 very small storefronts facing into the alley, kind of activate that alley, and we feel like there's because the scale is so unique there, and we have some more entrances there, that is a place that we're willing to take risk on fronting retail that's not on 900 South. We're very sensitive to making retail a success, and having entrances that aren't on 900 South, that aren't as easily visible, it's really hard to make those retail spaces work. So we really want to make the retail as successful as possible, and 900 South is why we focus most of the entrances on there, while still trying to bring it around and activate 200 West in Washington.
Any other questions for the applicant right now?
I have one. The building that's remaining on site and you're building around, what's kind of happening in that interstitial space between the back of that building and your building?
We have the elevated podium with a green wall that's going to be separating the two. We have a very good relationship with Rosa and Jose, who own that building. Rosa runs a water company out of one side, and her daughter runs a salon out of the other. We've gone through the plans with them. They're actually really excited because they see this density as more customers for them and for their storefront. So we're working closely with them. We have to for utilities. Their utilities actually come out from and run along through our property onto Washington. Their sewer and water do. So we have to reroute those for them. So we have a pretty close relationship with them and trying to be as sensitive as we can to make sure that we're good neighbors and we can kind of seamlessly fit into the street and work well with them.
Yeah, because I guess what I'm seeing is there's some access from the alley currently through a shared parking lot. Is there going to be any access to the back of their building for maintenance or anything else? How would they kind of access that if they needed to?
So their lot is very small. It extends behind their building just a couple of feet. So they don't have any access to their building even now. When they need to come on the site and they really just access the front of the building. That's where their customers are and that's where they are. So to the west of their building, we have a 12-foot buffer that we're creating a patio or hopefully a retail spot to move into that acts as a buffer to them, and also any utilities that they have, we're bringing out through that onto 9th South. And we have an access agreement with them. So their building, as far as operationally, won't change from how it's operating now, except we're going to be rerouting their sewer and water and updating those.
Okay. Yeah, that answers my questions.
Okay. Any other questions right now for the applicant? Okay, don't see any. Okay, thank you very much. We'll now move to the public hearing. We'll go ahead and open up the public hearing and ask Wayne if there's anyone here from the community council that we can.
If anybody is here to speak on this matter, if you'd please raise your hand. We have Zachary, who would like to speak on this matter also.
Okay, we'll go ahead and let Zach talk. He'll have 2 minutes for the norm.
Okay, Zach, I think you have panelists, but there's a little bit of lag, so whenever you're ready.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Hi, Zachary Dussault speaking in favor of the project. I love to hear when a developer does a presentation and talks about missing teeth and fixing them in a neighborhood. I went out to visit the site 2 days ago. I like the development going in across the street. I think this is a corner or an intersection that has great potential. It's well serviced by public transit and has the potential to continue to develop into a very walkable section of the city. I know I can't really ask direct questions of the developer in the public comment section, but I'd be interested to know what portion of the parking would be dedicated to residents and what would be allocated to the retail. I do like that the parking is under half a stall per unit. I think that's appropriate for the area. And I think that's it. Thanks.
All right, thank you. Okay.
I do not see any other hands raised.
Are there any emails that we've received?
We have not received any emails on this project.
Okay. Okay. Seeing no hands raised and no emails, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and bring the discussion back to the commission. Although I guess I will let James respond to the comment question from Zach about parking, if he would like to.
Sure. So we would like to reserve a material amount of the parking spots for residences, residents, to keep their automobiles off the street, and hopefully we leverage the new street improvements that the city is going to start next year, and keep that parking open for retail. There could be a chance that we have a small architect firm move in and we provide on-site parking for them. That is a fluid discussion, so we don't have a definite answer for that yet. But we hope that retail can be served enough by tracks, bus, walking, and other forms of transportation that allow us to keep our residents parking on site.
Great, thank you. Okay.
I have another question for the applicant.
Sure.
So I'm back to this alleyway again. Only being 17 feet wide.
Point of order, Adrian, don't you need to close the public hearing?
I'm sorry.
I did close the public hearing.
Oh, I totally missed it, I'm sorry.
That's quite all right. It was very uneventful.
Okay, so alley being only 17 feet wide means that these two buildings that you have are only, maybe 20 feet apart. And how tall are they right there?
65 feet.
Right, so we have this kind of dark slot. Are you improving that alleyway?
So
doesn't appear to be in your project area.
That's also a discussion that is city maintained, and they've been very particular on what can be done in that alley. For instance, pavers are a nightmare to maintain. Our goal is to work with them, and as this 9-line trail is coming through here and the 9-line street improvements are coming through here, to finalize what that's going to be. But our goal is to delineate a different area, even though it's going to be used by automobiles, from pedestrian use to automobile use. And if that's stamped concrete or whatever that case is, those discussions are yet to be finalized with the city. But our intent is to improve this part of the alley to make it an amenity.
Well, I'm pretty concerned actually that it's going to be heavily shaded most of the time with a 65-foot, it's going to be like a slot canyon, so to speak, because it's so narrow. It doesn't follow any of what we would call sort of standard ideas about how wide a street should be relative to the height of the buildings around it, which would mean more like 35 or 40 feet, not 65 feet for that width of the street. So I mean, at this late date, it seems like there's nothing to be done about this, except perhaps, if there's a really strong consideration of lighting and paving and improvements that could be done, and even making it would make a huge difference to this alleyway, to this what I would seem to be a kind of problem child with your building such tall buildings on either side of it.
We would agree. We are going to do our best to enhance and make this alley not a detriment or something that we're trying to hide, but something that we can feature.
And, you know, through our architects and through our landscape architect, we hope to, now again, this is public space, so we don't have any control over it. But our goal is to work closely with the city to figure out just those concerns and try to make it an amenity for the neighborhood as opposed to just an auto access. Taking into account shade and, you know, a canyon type of feature and seeing what we can do there to make that a pleasant space to use.
Okay. Any other questions for the applicant or staff or other comments for the other commissioners that you'd like to share?
I'm a little concerned that we are building such high density projects that, you know, have complete coverage of the site to the point where there is no, there's no open space, you know, other than up on the third level of these projects. There's no open space. There's no place to plant a tree, and it's and I know that we've somehow eliminated the requirement for open space in the service of trying to be more urban. But I would just like to voice a concern about this going forward. That I do believe that it's reasonable to have, you know, even at this point, for example, well, with this picture we're looking at right now, to have, you know, widened out the building a little bit there and provide some kind of more of a plaza space, some, because people who are living in this building, and there are going to be a lot of them, you know, really have almost nowhere to go.
The city council just allocated $6.5 million between West Temple and Third West along 900 South for a whole myriad of street improvements, including median trees and so to your point, this is
it's not where you know, take your dog or your kid. Is not a median. You know, that's not an acceptable open space.
I completely agree. Our building faces are, you know, one thing we do have going in this neighborhood is that our park strips and sidewalks are pretty wide here, so there is a lot of space. I mean, the city is planning this incredible green space and urban space coming through 9th South that'll really soften up and provide a lot of places to gather and to take your dog and have a nice walk with your child. So we really want to leverage that as well in the proximity to tracks. And the city it's almost through. I think they're going out for construction for CD bids here shortly for it, but it's a ton of street improvements that they're putting in here to add more of that space you're talking about, Brenda, along 9th South.
You know, this particular area, and I know, Dennis, you've been involved in this area for quite a long time in a very positive way and had a huge influence, I think, over its development over time. But it's also one of the worst areas in the city for public open space, for parks and things like that. And I mean, it lacks more there. And I don't think street improvements, as nice as they are and as wonderful they do, they give, you know, adults an opportunity to walk up and down and so forth, don't really substitute for, you know, a place where you can have a picnic or a playground or, you know, throw a Frisbee. So I'm hoping as you proceed in this neighborhood that you'll be actively looking for public park sites that the city can eventually acquire.
Well, I think that would be a decision for the city and not so much for an applicant, private land developer.
I'm just admonishing him as a leader in the community.
And I'm going to jump into this too to say, those of us who choose urban living, we know we're giving up some of those soft things. We would pick a different neighborhood if we didn't want this. So I'm blocks away from green space, and I have people building with animals. They figure it out. We figure it out. I mean, I think this is a great project. And the reality is that 9 line is going to be one of our best amenities, and this is just right there. They're going to have it in their front yard. So I just really commend this project. And I hear what you're saying, Brenda. We probably need some more parks in that neighborhood, but no, this isn't necessarily the responsibility of this project.
And if I may interject too, in 2011 we led a charrette, an intensive planning process for this neighborhood, and we really pushed the city to really leverage the fleet block, 8.5 acres that is city owned, that's just a block west of here, to really put in green space for all the residences that are going in here. So we are, Brenda, on our end, really advocating for open space for the city to incorporate into the fleet block, for a place for this neighborhood to have that kind of amenity there. So that's what we're hopeful for and pushing for.
Good.
And I would jump in. I would agree with Brenda that, you know, these things are important. I think in this particular instance, though, you know, I always run into green space and open space as being open to the sky, and I think sometimes you just end up with grass because it's a requirement. And I think open space, to me, also can be considered as covered space, and Utah summer is incredibly hot. I actually don't mind being in the shade during the summer. In the winter, obviously, there'll be some snow issues, but I think the way that the building opens up at the corners, obviously you need columns for structure, but it does open up and creates open space. Hopefully the planters are just placeholders and there's some more greenery in that area, but I would see this as actually some open space, and being able to engage in the alleyway, even though it's not owned, you know, by the developers, I think is a great idea and should happen more often, where we can reclaim streets that are underutilized. So I think this is a good use of the space, even though it may not fit our contemporary definition of open space. I still think it's pretty open, in my opinion.
Jonathan, I appreciate you pointing that out. We did pull back on those corners of the alley, the building, to have a little more open space, to open that up a little bit. I forgot about that. This has been in design for that. Exactly. You bring up a point that I forgot about.
Okay.
I just wanted to bring up one kind of follow up on the second west side retail portion. One of the things that I think is important on the second west side, even though you're concerned about the viability of retail there, is that that is an area that now most of the building is going to be, you know, solid, even though you're breaking it up with murals. But this is a highly trafficked street by tracks. You're going to have a lot of people riding through there. And I think that providing some sort, what I'm concerned about is that without an entrance on the second west side of that particular building, is that what I've been seeing a lot happening lately too in some retail is that they're covering these windows that are meant to be open to have that pedestrian visibility activation. And they're covering those windows, blocking them off, putting those screens on them that have a picture. I don't know what that's called. And I'm concerned about that potential because I think it's still important to have some of that visibility into those spaces on that northern end on Second West, because otherwise there's not anything of interest for all those people who are getting off tracks right there. And so how could you, I guess, James, how would you approach that to try and ensure that that particular portion remains kind of visibly open?
I completely agree, Amy, that if we're gonna make retail space there, we want to make it successful. And there are transparency requirements that we have to abide by in the zone, where we can't cover up the windows with. There has to be transparency into the space. There is an entrance on 200 West. It's close to 900 South, but we do have an entrance off of 200 West. We don't know the retailer who's going to be there. We're hoping that if it's a corner, it's going to be a larger retailer. So we want to give them optionality where there's an entrance off of 200 West, and they can control who's coming in and who's coming out, and then using the rest of the space for their needs and purposes. But that's not to say that maybe we divide that up into two smaller retailers and we add a door, you know, further down on that other part to accommodate two separate retailers. We're open to that. If we're going to go ahead and build this space, we want to make it as flexible and as useful and as successful as possible. So we're by no means opposed to. Our intention is not to hide this space and just do it to appease planning and get through this. We have it designed here, and there are standards we have to abide by in building it in such a way.
Madam Chairman, I'm ready to make a motion.
Thank you, Sarah.
Based on the information, the staff report, the information presented, and the input received during the public hearing, I move that the commission approve the Sydney and Slate Plan Development PLN SUB 2018-00869 with the conditions listed in the staff report.
And motion by Sarah,
Second.
second by John. Let's start with Maureen.
Yes.
Amy.
Yes.
Matt.
Yes.
Andres.
Yay.
Sarah.
Yes.
Crystal.
Yes.
Brenda.
Yes.
John.
Yes.
Okay, motion passes unanimously. Thank you very much for the
Thank you.
presentation. That was very helpful.
Thank you very much.
All right. Agenda item number 5. The Gale Street Apartments Mixed-Use Design Review and Plan Development at approximately 550 South 300 West. Case number
Madam Chair?
Yes.
I don't know, I'd like to make an initial comment to the director about this one ahead of time, before the presentation starts, but I don't know if that's appropriate or if you would recognize that.
Let me introduce the item, and then I'm actually handing this one over to Brenda, and I will let her decide how to handle that. So it's case number PLN PCM 2019-00902 and PLN SUV 2019-01196. And due to a conflict of interest, I have to recuse myself, and Brenda will be handling this application.
If you have a question about procedure, then please do speak.
I don't know if I would classify it as procedure. I can hold off. It's definitely going to affect how I view this one, though.
Well, I think I think that would be most appropriately just after the presentation, then we'll have discussion. Okay. Thank you. Okay, so presenting this one will be Casey, and we're turning it over to you, Casey.
Great, thank you. Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So this project is a 5-building mixed-use type project. And as you can see on the vicinity map, it's located between 500 and 600 South and 300 and 400 West, the area outlined in red. And near the top of the image, you can see the 600 South off-ramp and the 500 South on-ramp, and Pioneer Park on the right, kind of give you some sense of where you are. Okay. So here's the site again, and I'll go one more. And here's the proposed site plan. So there are 5 buildings proposed. You can see noted on the drawing. There are currently 13 parcels that will be consolidated into 3 parcels that are out of the pale yellow that you see highlighted there. And the proposal would build these 5 buildings, building 1 being primarily retail, Building 2 having some retail on the ground level and then residential units above. Building 3 is similar, some retail on the ground level with residential units also on the ground level and above. Building 4 with retail on the ground level, residential units above, and Building 5 being strictly multifamily residential building. This would, as you can see, cover more than half of the block. There would be multiple interior private streets to this project. On the site plan, they're calling them the South and North Lunar. As you can see, those between the top buildings and then Building 3 and 4. And then there's Gale Street that goes down from north and south through the block. That will be a private. It's an existing alley. It's named Gale Street, but it is a private alley and will be continued as private as well, but incorporated into the project with some landscaping and mainly a pedestrian way. There will be a total number of 581 residential units among the 5 buildings. 27,000 square feet of commercial retail space and parking for up to 665 automobiles. This application, or this project, is going through 2 applications this evening. One is the plan development for some setback changes primarily, and then a design review to modify some of the D2 zoning district design standards. And I'll go through each building and the modifications being proposed. So let's start with Building 1. In this rendering, you can kind of get a sense of at least buildings 1 through 4. 500 South being at the bottom of your screen, the private Gale Street on the right. Building 1 is right in the middle, in the center of the image. It's a 2-story commercial building. A couple of modifications proposed for this particular building would be the front setback. There's a maximum setback of 10 feet in the D2 zoning district, and this is proposed to be 21 feet setback from the front property line. The other part to this is that they're requesting some parking in front of the building, and you can see in this rendering the proposed parking area, but it has since been modified to be 4 parallel parking stalls instead of the diagonal parking stalls shown here, and it went from 7 stalls down to 4. The D2 has a requirement that if a front yard is provided, that it be landscaped. So in this case, with the parking, it would not be fully landscaped. So that is one modification sought through the plan development process. Okay, moving on to building number 2, you can see on the left side of the image, the modifications for this particular building are building height and exceeding that 10-foot maximum setback as well. On both sides of this building, it would exceed the 10-foot. On one side, it would be 11 feet on the 500 South side, and on the 300 West side, it would be 13.5 feet. So not a lot, but still some modification in setback there. Part of the reason for building number 2 setback is an existing billboard on the 300 West site. I'll see if I can bring that up for you. As you can see, to the left of building 2, to the left of this image, there's an existing billboard there that is somewhat dictating the location of the building. This whole block has 7 existing billboards on it. The project site, has 2 of those that are pole-mounted billboards, and will be modified. So the developer actually built. Okay, building 3. I'm sorry, there's another shot of the billboard. That's not currently what it says, but to give you a sense of what's there. Building 3 is the gray building, multiple shades of gray, not 50 shades of gray. That's a bad reference there, but the center building, some of the modifications for it include building height and the length of a space between a building entrance. If I can find a better image for this one. So here's building 3. This is from 300 West. And that span outlined in red is the portion that does not have a building entrance on it. The requirement is that on average there be an entrance at least every 50 feet. This one is 79 feet between entrances. So that's building 3. I'll move to building 4. Building 4 is on the corner of 600 South and 300 West. And it has, building height is a modification sought, as well as the area in red there is a section of blank wall that is longer than 15 feet. It's at 16 feet. This is on 600 South. You can see the west portion of the building. There is a ramp that starts at sidewalk level, goes up to the left, and then cuts back to the right and connects back up to the dark gray part of the building and accesses, that's essentially a landscaped ramp. And that portion does not have glass in it or an actual use in it. But part of that is because you can kind of see in there, there's a billboard standing up, it's a white billboard. And that area is for the billboard easement and will have some ground-mounted utility boxes in it. So at any rate, that portion of the building does not have an entrance, as well as that reduces the amount of glass along that full length of the building. And we're considering the building to be the whole elevation. It does split into 2 separate structures above the second level and higher, but at ground level, it is considered one structure.
Casey, what's the length of that ramp?
The overall building length is 236 feet. It's about 100 feet, more or less, what I can tell. I don't know the exact dimension. The ground floor uses, again, that's ramp section. The fact that there's no use there does reduce the length, the percentage of the building that contains a ground floor use down to, the staff report says 70%. Further review of the drawings is actually 66% there. And then the building length. Nothing over here. The design standard says 200 feet is the maximum length for buildings. This one is 236 feet on this side. Excuse me, 293 feet on this side. And on the previous side, on this feet, is 236 feet long. And building 3 also is longer than 200 feet. And it's at 244 feet. Then moving on to building number 5 is the straight multifamily building. and it's on the other side of the alley. You can see in the image the brown building in the background is Building 4 that we just talked about. So Building 5 would be a 5-story multifamily building. They're exceeding the height. This is a CG district, so general commercial building height limit is 60 feet. They're proposing 68 feet. And then the front setback and the rear setback are proposed for modification. The front setback being, 0 feet. So 0-foot setback on the front and a 5-foot setback on the rear. The CG normally would require a 10-foot setback on the front and a 10-foot setback on the rear. As you can see to the building to the north, that curved building, that's at 0 foot, actually it extends across its property line. So this Building 5 would match that setback. And then lastly, you can see in this site plan, there's a note here, the pink note that says lot not on a public street. This would be a new lot carved out for the existing building on that lot that's going to be renovated. And that lot there, that rectangular lot, would not front a public street. It would front Gale Street, which is private. There would also be an access from 400 West through Building 5 lot to that building, but again, it would not front a public street. So that is one of the plan development items requested. So I think that covers the modification sought. Just some key items to consider. This is a fairly large site, presents significant opportunity, and the proposed 5-building project has quite a bit of landscaping, pedestrian ways, and all the parking will be contained within the buildings. There'll be sub-level parking as well as ground-level parking, but all within the parking structure, except for those 4 parallel stalls up by Building 1. So all the parking is contained within the site and pretty well, for the most part, hidden from public view. The amount of amenities provided to the general public and to the residents is significant. There will be public easements through the project, through Gale Street and through the Lunars. The developer does intend to allow a public access to the site. So staff has reviewed this project, all the buildings, compared them to the standards for design review, and where applicable, the plan development standards, and found that it meets them, and recommends approval of the project, both the design review and plan development, and we have 2 conditions listed in our recommendation. 1, that they consolidate all the lots, and 2, that they add some landscape features or pick from a list of 2 or 3 features to include in the landscape area just to the right of this existing new lot that's being created that doesn't front a public street. Just to the right of it is a triangular area, and the design review standards requires some more amenities there, so that's a condition of approval. Either some type of gathering area or more trees. So that's the end of my presentation at this point. Happy to answer any questions.
So that ramp, the long one, is just an architectural element. It's not actually for use by pedestrians. Am I seeing that correctly?
That's correct.
How wide is that ramp?
When you say wide, you mean if I were to looking down on it from the sky?
Like if you were to walk down it.
I probably have to defer to the architect on that one. He's here, but I don't know the exact dimensions on that.
Is there any concern about people walking on it when they should or should not? Okay.
Okay.
All right. Thanks.
Is the applicant here? Hello, is the applicant here?
Yeah.
The applicant is here, and it's Peter Berger, I believe, is going to be doing the presentation. Peter, are you here? Peter, are you here? Casey, do you know?
Can you guys hear us? Have we been admitted?
Yes.
This is Ben Lowe, and I know Peter is on as well. I don't know if there's technical difficulties. Can you guys hear us?
We can hear you, Ben, yes. There we go. Peter is able to share his screen now.
Peter, can we hear you?
Cannot hear Peter.
It worked for Peter in the trial run this morning. Peter, if your computer's not working, you can call in as well.
Give him just a minute here to figure it out.
I have a question in the meantime. Andres?
Yes, go ahead, Andres.
I'm curious, is the project a private project, or is the city going to be part owner of the project?
The city will not be part owner of the project. It's completely private.
Okay, thank you.
Appears as though Peter is able to kind of work his screen on there and everything. We're just not able to hear him yet.
Just checking to see if you can call in if his computer's not working. So he's saying he's called and he can hear us, but it sounds like for some reason we can't hear him even though he's on the phone. So he's not muted here.
Hey, Wayne, did he come in on the phone as an attendee, and do we need to move him up?
Yeah, he is actually a panelist now, and has control of the screen. So
I'm just wondering if his phone call came in as an attendee and his computer is coming in as a participant.
Interesting. What?
He might be calling user 4.
Let's maybe give it a shot.
Yeah, let's try that. It's a good call. Let's see. Call in user 4. Can you tell us who you are?
Can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Who is it?
Oh, this is Peter.
Okay, got it. Good, good.
This was much easier earlier.
Yeah, I don't know what happened.
So you guys can see my screen, is that right?
We can, yes.
Can't see your screen.
So maybe now that we have Peter, I'll just do a quick introduction. This is Ben Lowe with Lowe Property Group. And we have Peter Berger on with MBE Partners as the architect. And we appreciate being here virtually today and appreciate being able to share this project on behalf of us as well as our various partners, Bridge Investment Group, Q Factor, and BCG Capital as well. Anyway, we've been working on this project for a long time. It's obviously a big project where we bought the entire block, what we call the Newspaper Agency Corporation block. You know, it's right at the entry to the city. We've been working really hard to really do something interesting and unique here for the city. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you, Peter, to just kind of present the thought that went into this project, and we'd be happy to answer any questions.
Yeah, thank you, Ben, and thank you everyone for bearing with me there. I appreciate your time and being here virtually. So the project that we have before you is being called Gale Street in the agenda. However, we have there's been some internal repositioning of just the branding of the project being called Post House. So that's what you see on the screen, Post House. But from the onset, we started to look at this block in its entirety, being that ownership owns the entire block, not just what we're on the agenda item for today, but actually all the buildings on the block. So we try to look at this really from a global standpoint from day one. And really the phrase that kept coming up is the complete neighborhood. It's all about creating a self-sustaining urban environment, which provides a framework for mixed-use development, but also contains distinct character and identity. And just with this bigger idea that it can serve as a model for revitalizing Salt Lake City's larger city blocks. So when we dive into that a little bit further into our site and how that kind of concept applies to our site, the site holds a variety of mixed-use industrial buildings. Most notably, as Ben just stated, the Newspaper Agency Corporation building. And maintaining the structures that we thought were worth saving would help keep kind of the existing feel of what the neighborhood has to offer, and then strategically site planning, you know, an internal network of living streets with a focus on the pedestrian rather than the vehicle, and introducing new construction in a very purposeful way to try and maintain what is worth keeping and also adding value to what is worth keeping. And so some guiding directives included distributed and shared amenities, playing up this idea of multi-level, multi-layer, and multi-use, having true synergy between existing commercial buildings that will get rehabbed and repurposed with new construction and kind of new features on the block, and really creating a synergy across the entire block. Creating a curated retail experience, not just inviting in the first tenant who wants to, you know, be a part of this, but actually creating a very unique overall environment in that curated experience. And then creating purpose through block public space and interest. This is, I know there's some language about trying to create through block connectivity with some of the larger blocks being the larger urban grid in downtown Salt Lake, but actually not just creating these pass-throughs, but doing it in a very, very purposeful way, actually creating real livable streets that people live and walk on. And that really what is the last bullet point is all about, this Zwunner style of living streets where it is all about the pedestrian. And of course the car can get through there, but it's about making that car feel uncomfortable, to slow traffic down, and really, as you see in this background image here, make it so that, you know, you can walk your kids down the middle of the street in this environment and it feel very comfortable and very safe. So jumping to the site, I know Casey covered a lot of this, but I'll jump through it really quickly. But we've highlighted the site as the complete block, again, being that ownership owns the entire block, kind of looking at certain walk radiuses and distances. Obviously, we're sandwiched there in between 500, 600 south to our north-south, and then 300 to 400 west. And then obviously some of the very, I guess, obvious things about the site that are very exciting to us, but just the arteries of 500 south and 600 south being a true, you know, first impression of the city as well as last impression of the city. So just how do you utilize those view corridors and create architecture, create placemaking, create, you know, signage and you know,
three-dimensional spaces, even about roof decks and what you can see from the project, but also what you can see from the pedestrian and the public moving up and down those streets has been a very purposeful kind of effort on the planning. And then this diagram kind of goes without saying, but again, we mentioned this earlier. Here, the site, we start on the left and move to the right, but here's our current site. We take that site and pull it out into its isolation, and really you're 4x to 9x what a typical urban grid is across the country. I mean, if we're in downtown Portland, I know this is, everyone knows this, but you know, here in Portland, we're talking about redeveloping 6 blocks, you know, and so on and so forth. So it's just getting our heads wrapped around that mindset and not looking at this as this massive project, but really how do we break this down into a more walkable urban grid, which is the next kind of diagram that we jumped into with these shared use alleys and creating purposeful connections. And then finally, in the last portion of this diagram, how do you add value for the entire block? And it's really about creating these living, walkable streets. So from there, we're going to jump into the site plan. Again, I know Casey did a quick introduction, but you know, buildings 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 are really the new construction buildings that you know this agenda item is for. But I did want to highlight obviously the existing commercial buildings that will be repurposed. The larger one being the Newspaper Agency Corporation building, and then the 3 smaller ones with a lot of fantastic character. We're talking about creating a place that has instant character from day one, and it's not fabricated. It's actually honest and respectful of what the history is, and only enhancing that product and creating a better overall built environment. But as Casey stated, we're 581 dwelling units. And with that original concept of creating the complete block, we looked at the product range in these 581 units and wanted to create an actual real range, something that goes as low as 385 square feet of micro loft type of style living that offers a price point for someone to be a part of this community that is going to come at a lower level, all the way up to, you know, over 2,000 square foot, you know, 2 and 3 bedrooms that offer a much higher price point. You know, the goal of building 2 is actually to create this elevated style of rental living within the city, larger windows, larger floor-to-floors, master bath with 5 pieces and floating tubs and things like that, that really just offer this product range across the board. And then even within those price points, you know, creating townhome units and units that actually address the ground floor with stoops that actually live off of these streets, and then also various multi-level units throughout the building up above, and then obviously market rate flats as well. So it's really creating this complete neighborhood kind of product range that allows, again, every price point, every demographic to really be a part of this. And then, you know, highlighted in this ground floor graphic are a couple things that I want to point out. One is the distribution of retail that we have throughout the site. You can see building 1 as the really complete retail building, complete commercial building, 2-story building that would have some roof deck components to it from a commercial standpoint to be elevated from the street. Building 2 with great visibility off of course, 500 South there. And then some of the retail components as well that are more southern, kind of located along, we're calling it Post Road, which was formerly known as Gale Street, that really highlight, as Casey said, there's that 1-story, I don't know if everyone can see my cursor, but there's that 1-story commercial building that sits directly east of Building 5. And in front of that building, we've designed these network of streets so that that portion in front of that street of Post Road and in front of that building can actually shut down, and we can host larger events of scale, and that can be a true urban plaza that, you know, both new construction and existing buildings can live off of and celebrate and be a part of, and still the buildings still function without, if there is an event going on there. If I'm a resident, I can still get in and out of these buildings in a very clean way, and so on and so forth. And then the second thing that I did want to note is, you know, Salt Lake, we are trying to break down the scale and make this more pedestrian friendly, but we also want to be mindful that people do love their cars. It is car friendly, so we have provided ample amount of parking as well as ample amount of parking entrances to these buildings to allow for the public to access these buildings with ease. It's not like, oh, I missed the one entry and now I'm stuck and I've got to drive around the entire block. There's other entries, 3 entries per both building 3 and 4, that would be the more commercial parking component. That's just, again, thinking about that user. And then finally, the last comment I want to make on this image is, you know, Post Road and formerly Gale Street has really been purposely designed to have these angles and turns to, again, slow down traffic and make it more pedestrian friendly. You're not just flying through here and it's, you know, you're connected to Waze and it's that quick, you know, way through to get out of the city or something like that. This is all about slowing down traffic, making it more neighborhood friendly, urban friendly, walkable friendly, pedestrian friendly. So on the ground floor with that along with that, just kind of repeating some of these stats again, 27,300 square feet of commercial retail space, and then 52,000 square feet of ground floor pedestrian plaza space, whether that's in form of green and trees or actual hardscape and plaza. That's where that's occurring. And one of the nice things about these connection streets, these through connection streets and the alleys in the road in the post road, these are private streets, so there's certain things that we're going to be able to do in terms of that I know is mentioned in the previous applicant's presentation, but we're going to have the ability to do pavers in here. We're having the ability to do zero curbs and create this just really incredible experience and just very different experience. And then moving up from this level to the podium level, you start to see how this synergy of these blocks start to come together. So building 3 and 4 would be connected by an actual bridge up at the upper level to connect these users and make you feel like a part of an overall larger community. And then with that, buildings 2 and 5, they would still have a shared amenity use with, we're showing the purple area on the south there in building 4. So again, it's going to force people out on the streets and walk through the space. And then finally, addition to that, the commercial users on site built into their agreements, they actually have the ability to use the fitness component, rather large fitness component. It's kind of the last stat that I have on the left there, 5,600 square feet of joint fitness amenity between the commercial users and the residential users. So it goes back to that initial slide about the complete neighborhood, having this synergy of uses and allowing this to be, you're not just a commercial user that comes and goes during business hours. You actually have the ability to stay and work out and be a part of this this overall development. So that was very, very purposeful. And then finally, you know, making sure some of these amenities actually, and there's another slide that explains this further, but some of these amenities are very purposely positioned where they're visible from the street, whether they're the 400 West, 600 South, 300 West, or 500 South. You're seeing rooftop decks. You're seeing these bridge components. You're seeing these amenities. They're not in your face at the ground floor, but they are this concept of three-dimensional connections of these uses, which we think just adds to the simulated environment that we're creating. So from here, let me see if I can manage this. I know we had some technical difficulties, but we have an animation that I want to share. And can everyone see the screen here? I've switched over to an animation.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Fantastic. Let me play. This runs about 2 minutes, and I apologize if it's a little jumpy, but it's really, we've called this whole district the Post District, and a lot of the kind of branding efforts and things like that are really formulated around the Newspaper Agency Corporation history on the building, which is the bigger building that you can see in this arrow right now. But this gives you a taste of the look and feel of what we're trying to create. And we'll get into this right after this, but we'll start to get into some of the architectural components. But we do not want this to feel like this is one architect, one style across 581 units. It's all about, you know, again, that whole concept of the complete neighborhood, creating architecture that's diverse throughout, that tells a story of something that's more traditional and industrial inspired, all the way to a much more modern, contemporary, kind of lasting impression, which is that building 4 and everything in between. So I'm going to let this kind of play out, but it starts to show these series of spaces that we're trying to create on the block. Then obviously here you get a glimpse of some of the existing commercial buildings that will be repurposed, obviously through an additional agenda item and application, but still just getting that overall feel of what the block is after.
We apologize that the video is so jumpy. It's pretty smooth normally, but I think it's struggling because of the size.
And we did, I believe, we did share this, Casey, correct me if I'm wrong, we did share this with you. So if you guys want to see this in addition, where you can download it and see it at a smoother fashion, please reach out. Feel free to reach out. So again, here's from 500 South, moving south through Post Road. In Building 3 and Building 4 on the left there. So we'll, let's see here. Let me see if I can't manage to switch back. Stop. And then,
You're back, Peter, for us.
oh, you can see the PDF again?
Yes.
Okay.
If you go to the next sheet, I think everybody will see it's the PDF.
okay.
Okay.
There you go.
Does everyone
Yeah.
see the image on the screen? Yes? Okay. So these are just a couple snippets from that animation that we'll run through pretty quickly, but obviously the existing NAC building, NAC building here, the Newspaper Agency Corporation building, Building 4, 5, if you can see my cursor, it's kind of close on the screen, then 3, the 50 Shades of Gray building. I love that, Casey, that was good, and then Building 1 here in the distance. So Post Road moving, again, north-south from 600 south to 500 west, and then we have what we're calling Bly and Wells Alley moving east-west. So I'll flip through a couple of these pretty quickly, but obviously, again, what the animation was after is just look and feel and concept and what were these meaningful spaces that we're trying to create at the ground plane. So from there, I'm going to jump to architecture and you know, again, that jumping still back to that original concept of the complete neighborhood. The architecture is all about creating a balance between grit, texture, authenticity, and evocative forms. You know, we have this very authentic nature of some of these existing buildings, how those are going to get repurposed, and creating architecture that's complementary to that, but again, part of the same family. So that some of the guiding directives are that just along that point. Diversified, but part of the same language. You know, being very purposeful with every building having its own window patterns and masking patterns and material patterns, and not just applying something across the board. Even if we change a material, we want to change the window pattern as well. So very purposeful on that notion. And then being responsive to the industrial history of the site and creating a lasting impression. And the architecture here is not just to create a lasting impression in Salt Lake City. The goal of the ownership group and really, you know, us as architects on especially this Building 4 being its first impression coming up 600 South, is creating this just absolutely just, you know, impressionable building that is noticeable not only at a Salt Lake level coming into one of the main arteries into the city, but really you're going to see this building somewhere and just say, oh, that's Salt Lake City, you know, and just in having it being iconic, again, to the greater extent of the nation and really in the world. We do projects all around the world and at our firm, and this I can definitely tell you that this is going to turn heads in a positive way about leaving that lasting impression. So that was really what this Building 4 was all about. And then here's an additional glimpse of that. And really what the concept was and how we came to this form is, you know, we have a series of buildings on the block, and you know, and we'll go through them. But we started with the very blocky industrial style building of Building 2. We switched then to a more transitional building in Building 3, that the 50 Shades of Gray building that is about using the same kind of textures of the industrial nature with brick, but doing it in a modern fashion. And then Building 4 was really kind of taking the envelope off that and chiseling down the forms in this kind of industrial quality that starts to become more organic, more reflective of the Wasatch in the distance. And really, as you're across the raised interstate, you're going to see this building in its entirety in this form with the mountains beyond. You have that ability to be in this raised setting, which is, I think, is really interesting and really impactful, being that this would be in this first impression kind of moment. One of the things I absolutely look forward to is when this building gets snow on the roof and how that reflects to the mountains beyond. Having that strong connection of character, I think, is going to be really, really powerful. And then one of the items too I want to note here that you start to see on the right, we very purposely put some of the amenities out on the glass, very noticeable from the public realm, to kind of create that connection of uses and not making it this really private enclosed thing in the residences that's just apart from the city. It's all engaged. An additional view that starts to show, again, just how impactful this varying architecture is between Building 3 and Building 4, and what that does at the ground plane. It really starts to make you put you into a setting of an urban environment. And I hate using the phrase "built over time." I feel it's very overly used, but it has this feeling of built by multiple uses and multiple synergies that come together to create this very interesting sense of place. So, and then there's definitely going to be a high emphasis on art and sculpture throughout the space, but you get to start to sense of the pavers and the zero curb and how we can really craft this street and this experience to be extremely pedestrian friendly. This is one of our east-west alleys, Wells Alley. It's actually on the north side, so we're seeing Building 2 on the right, Building 3 on the left. One of those guiding principles with architecture is varying window patterns and massing. So again, on the right, very industrial inspired. You know, there's definitely a purpose of how the window breakup is going to work, how the windows are going to operate. We have an increased floor-to-floor height in this building to reflect a more authentic industrial floor-to-floor height. So these are going to be, you know, going to experience much more loft-like, larger volume types of living. And then onto the left here, again, a varying window pattern, taking the brick notion, but doing it in a more contemporary fashion with this darker brick and lighter brick, and then obviously changing railing patterns and massing patterns. And then what I absolutely love about this, and I appreciate the challenges of the previous applicant on the alley condition, but here we wanted to create an alley that felt urban, but still had some of those qualities at the ground plane that made it very pedestrian friendly, introducing these stoops in very purposeful locations and landscape components. And then one of the things we did on this alley is we actually stopped the traffic ability and didn't connect it all the way through to Post Road. So there's a very purposeful open, large open space. You might have seen it in the animation in the distance here that would be a fantastic space for retail to spill out to and so on and so forth and to gather. So, and then this is that Building 1. Casey highlighted a similar notion here, all commercial. And part of the reasoning for these setbacks that I know were definitely variations. We do have the billboards, and one of the billboards that does not exist on site, but actually has an impact to this exact building, is there's a line of sight that we had to respect. And Building 1, and really Building 2 as well, were positioned to respect that line of sight for the billboard. So that's why some of these massing breaks and setbacks and heights kind of came to be. And that's even that much more noticeable. Well, sorry, not in this view, we'll get to it, but Building 2 on the left, 1 on the right, you start to see that billboard on the left. Here's some of those images of some of these raised bridges that you'll start to see that connect the project. So some of these really interesting focal points that are up above to draw interest. And this was the view I wanted to turn to. This is, again, Building 2, you're on 500 South, leaving the city. We very purposely located some of these rooftop amenities to be in these key kind of connections, whether you're going in and out of the city. So you're seeing those uses from a distance, although they're up high. And then you can start to see on the right hand of the screen here, where you get a glimpse of that billboard. It's kind of cut off, but you start to see how the buildings had to be positioned in step to respect some of those the ordinances that are written in those view triangles. And then finally, Building 5, which is I absolutely, it's one of my kind of sneaky favorite moments on the site, just because we are preserving a lot of existing buildings, and instead of taking the leftover space and just saying it is what it is, it's not an efficient building, it's not perfectly kind of great for certain uses, we're able to introduce a new use, a new price point in the demographic in these. This is the micro loft building that still gets to be a part of the overall community and obviously front on these certain streets, but and some great opportunities kind of on the bottom left there for signage and art and kind of a focal wall that draws you as a front door to this project, to this building in particular. But again, in this building, again, very purposely creating a new style of architecture for it, much more contemporary nature, but still using corrugated metal from an industrial standpoint, kind of a nod to the industrial component. But again, positioning roof decks where what these key focal points, you're actually seeing those roof decks. So you'll be on the intersection of 400 West and 600 South entering the city, and you might be at the stoplight. You'll be able to see that roof deck very purposely, and those were positioned in that fashion.
And then finally, I want to run through the amenities, not so much as a look how great these amenities are and it's going to be great for these residents, but more so, it's really the last bullet point here. It's creating these crafted network of distinctive rooftop and outdoor amenity spaces, but this whole concept of to view and to be viewed. A lot of our amenities have been positioned in these key visible locations so that it's not only a great component to be a part of, but it's also a great component to view from the public realm. And in a situation like this, having additional eyes out to the street, increases the safety of the neighborhood and so on and so forth. So there's a lot of great kind of components there. And then obviously some other guiding directives here, really create amenities that set themselves apart from the market, an all-in-one experience for a vibrant community, talking about that synergy of uses between the commercial and the residential with the fitness component, and a refreshing place to relax. So here's a kind of a diagram that shows the upper level kind of amenities for the project that are more residential specific, but you can see here in building 4, as well in building 5, the placement of the rooftop decks to be visible from 600 South, visible from 400 West. Same goes for buildings 3 and building 2 rooftop decks, visible from 300 West and 500 South. And then this component of having these 2 courtyard areas that are linked by an internal bridge, as well as having some of these amenities bleed out. You start to see some of these amenities from the street, which I think just adds character to the street. And then this is another view that shows that internal kind of raised network of uses with these upper bridges as well. That would be an additional layer of visible cues from the street. So you're seeing some of these rooftop decks like here in building 4, how these uses come and spill out to this corner. Again, a lot of this is driven too by we had to be very creative how, this is a billboard here in this location, how to respect that view triangle, keep massing low and our taller building components away to respect those notions, but introduce amenities that, again, are visible from the street. We have a very interesting indoor-outdoor play with our pool, so it can be used year-round. And then this is that bridge component that links the 2 courtyards. And why I get really excited about this is it not only is going to create an interesting experience when walking above, but this alleyway and the character of this alley, and this is going to be visible actually if we pulled the view back, it'd be that plaza space, seeing that bridge connection and how that's actually going to just create interest and kind of a different experience of what this space ends up being. I think just add value to only the residents as well as the overall space and these connections. And then finally, this is a more passive courtyard, and the other courtyard within building 3, more about being more open, more about being green, some more flexibility in the uses, some outdoor barbecues, and so on and so forth. And then finally, that concept of view and be viewed. This is a zoom in of the rooftop deck on building 2, again, that you would view as you leave the city. And then again, that lasting impression about that, or I guess that first impression, excuse me, of this building 4, how that rooftop deck is located there, to be seen as you enter, and also to see from that view as well, beyond to the valley and kind of the Wasatch in the distance, but just creating an absolutely lasting impression. So I'm gonna leave it with that. That completes our presentation. Obviously, we are extremely excited about this. We think there's a lot of amazing components to this, and really creating unique quality that just creates a very fantastic urban living environment.
Okay, thank you, Peter.
Yeah.
So, does any of the commission members have any questions for Peter or for sorry, Katie? At this time?
I do. So Peter, concerning building 1, I'm wondering why do you need an increased setback for those 4 parallel parking spaces when you have a surface parking lot you're preserving just west of there? That's pretty large.
So it's kind of twofold. The biggest kind of guiding directive of how that massing step back is really the billboard. We've tried to pull that mass back to say that the billboard, even on that particular billboard, is lower. I forget what the exact number is, but it's lower than the rest on the site. So we had to be really smart about locating that building. We couldn't just place the building right in front. And so without it being, honestly, kind of an awkwardly small building. So that's what guided some of that. And then the parking that's actually not part of this application, but part of it's really more so parking for the Newspaper Agency Corporation building to serve that tenant. So those stalls were just a way to create some convenient parking for people leaving the city and being able to stop in. If they wanted to pick up a food component or something like that, they can, but just also being smart with the use of that space.
So, and Amy, I would add one thing, just that to Peter's credit, billboards are obviously a challenge in this town. We bought this block from the billboard owner. There's a reason why it's hasn't sold for a long time, and we worked really hard to build a range of billboards, but there were a lot of rules around these, and so that billboard with Building 1 was one of the billboards where there are easements and view easements and setbacks that we had to respect as part of the easement that were set up for that billboard. And it's the same thing on this view we're looking at right here, where we have this ramp. We have to step back the massing of the building in order to maintain the view corridor required for this billboard, as well as an easement area adjacent to the billboard that's required that unfortunately just, as much as we want to negotiate or even offer to the billboard company, just is not something that's changing. So we worked really hard on this massing of how to keep it interesting and show that these blocks shouldn't just sit as dilapidated blocks for years and years, but we can work around them and make great projects, even with the billboards. I'm still hopeful at some point down the road that billboards could be reduced or moved or put on buildings, but at this point, the billboard company's not willing to allow that, nor the city ordinance. But that's part of the reason why we have this ramping is we do have an exit stair coming down under the ramp, so it's not just a ramp, it's purely an architectural feature. We need a pretty major exit stair for that whole plaza area that comes down along that, and we decided to create a ramp with landscaping on top of it. But then it also is on this piece where we're stepped down and maintaining that easement area, for the billboard. It's a real challenge on a site like this, but we think we did a pretty good job of figuring out how to work around and still create a great project.
So I can appreciate the issues with the billboard. I feel like the 4 parking stalls on Building 1 aren't necessary, that you could do some negotiation with the big surface parking lot you're maintaining and then landscape that your increased setback instead of putting 4 parallel parking stalls there. And I would like to go to the ramp. I don't know if Peter can put up a better screenshot of the ramp that's a little focused more on that, because I'm wondering, I want to get a better idea of what the treatment is to the length of, what did Casey say that length was? 100 feet, about 100 feet of this ramp. What's the treatment of the part that's facing the road? Because I get that we're having grass on the ramp as it's going up, but how are we treating this 100 feet of wall to stick south? I can't quite get a good visual of that.
Yeah, so one of the things that the ramping is, so a couple things. With the billboard easement in that location, and I know we explained this all to Casey, one of the things that we're trying to be smart about is utilizing that easement to work with Rocky Mountain Power and place our transformers in that location. So we will have some transformers in that location. But in addition to that, the kind of portion that you're seeing on screen here, if you kind of see my cursor hovering, that's actually going to be landscaped area. It's not particularly shown very well, but that will be landscaped as well. So you will have some landscape area that's on grade within that portion that's going to allow for, substantial landscape to grow. And then one of the things that we are looking at currently is potentially if we can extend this retail glazing down to capture as much of it as we can. We do unfortunately have that component of, behind this piece, we've snuck in an exit stair for this upper, larger gathering space that we just need per code to really make.
Do you have a better visual of what you're talking about?
I'm trying to think. I don't know if I do in the presentation.
Do you have the model open, Peter?
I don't, how about, do you see this view here?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so some of this is out of date, and I apologize. This graphic came from our landscape architect, but currently our stair, if I draw on this real quick, the platform kind of sits there from up above, and it's going to stare down here, and then it's going to exit you out here. Within this portion of the site that I'm going to cloud right here, that's being utilized for the billboard maintenance easement, which is really this big white portion. It's pretty substantial. And then the remaining of that is going to be used for our transformers. It's showing green here, but we're utilizing that with Rocky Mountain Power to be a smart area, open to sky. It's a great connection point for them, and we thought that was a good use of space. So this is the portion here that I'm talking about where we can actually landscape that more appropriately. And I know there was a comment earlier about, you know, can people get on this ramp and walk up? No is the answer. Well, with some serious gymnastics, of course, anything's possible, but there's going to be, this ramp essentially is going to stop it roughly in that location. There's a substantial wall that happens there. But the remainder of this piece here can be properly landscaped, and we can extend the retail below that as much as we can. And the other idea here that we have that's in our that we have in our drawings that we've thought about is there's a planter that exists along this wall. You know, Rocky Mountain Power is pretty adamant about how you plant around their projects, but introducing a planter here that will allow for some landscape to happen, allow for some vines to grow, allow for some things to happen along that wall. So that's kind of the approach that we're taking in this space, in this location, if that makes sense.
Amy, if you go to page 16 in the staff report, there's a sort of plan of that area. There's a plan of all of it, actually, that shows you can zoom in. Oops, that's not it. Page 16, yeah, sorry.
Here's a better view of it. I have it on screen, I believe.
Yeah,
we're looking
that's
for.
like that one. But it doesn't, so where are the transformers in there?
So the transformer is going to sit right here. This
Okay.
is the easement needed for maintenance for the billboard.
And it's a ramp above that staircase. Is that where that ramp is?
Correct. And this is not just an open stair for people just coming in and out. There's secured doors here. It's an exit stair. So
okay.
I would just add that Casey brought this up to us as well, and so I think that based on Casey's comment, one of the options we can do, like Peter's saying, is extend that glass on that retail corner.
That'll make a
So I think that'll make a big difference. And then on the stair, we could open the stairs up too, which creates more of an open type of feeling. I think Peter, as we talked about it, has argued that he would prefer to plan it as a ramp just because you have so many cars coming up 6 South and looking east at it. That's really the view most people see is as they're coming by on cars. And so he felt like the green element coming up the ramp created a nice kind of piece to this, angular building. But we're open to exploring options and opening up the stairs if that would be preferred.
Yeah, I think that you have a challenge, and many developers share this, where you almost have to figure out how to design for both cars or trains passing by quickly, but also people on the ground. And so I'm not advocating for any one particular treatment, but having 100 feet of blank can be very imposing when you're walking it. It feels very uninviting. And there's stuff we could do. If you increase the glazing, great. If you did some sort of landscaping on the wall, great. To break it up so that it doesn't feel that big. And I recognize that you're trying to get two things, like how you're viewing it if you're in a car driving by. But I don't want to forget the pedestrian part, especially when you have this, proposed pedestrian area right by that building 5, the one without the frontage, the existing one you're keeping. You're going to have pedestrian movement right on that area that you should do some sort of pedestrian treatment to break that up, because 100 feet is long.
Yeah.
one other thing I would point out as you look at the site plan that Peter's showing, you know, as you look around these parking garages, obviously we've worked really hard to really wrap them in uses and trying to create, like Peter said, a full block. So we have residential in some sections and retail in some sections and entering an amenity and leasing center in another section. And obviously we have to have some, you know, some pieces where we can have some transformers and where we can have exiting stairs. And so we kind of chose the busiest little piece of the street and trying to make it, you know, kind of screen it. But we're really trying to activate this building at all angles. So you really, the pedestrian feels comfortable walking, you know, around and through this block. But I think we can definitely play with that glazing, play with that landscaping, and I think we're doing our best to recognize that.
Before we go on to any more comments from the commission, I'd like to open the public hearing on this project so that we can hear from the public, and then we can come back to the commission's comments and requirements. So Wayne, is there anybody from the public interested in speaking? Is there somebody from the community council here?
I see one hand, and that is Zach. Once again, would like to speak on this project.
Zach's going to have to teach other people how to do this.
He is.
Okay.
I'm going to move Zach over. Zach, whenever you can. Oh, sorry, Brenda.
The other question was, do we have a letter from the community council or any other public response?
Casey, I'll leave that up to you.
Yeah, no official comments or letters, emails from community councils. Did receive a call last week from someone interested in the project, but didn't give any actual comments. So
Brenda, just so you know, we did present to the community council at one of their meetings. They asked us to come present. They were all really positive about it and just said thanks for coming and presenting. So we did present this to them previously.
Thank you. All right.
Zach, you're
public hearing now. So Zach.
I'm trying to get other people to show up. This is Zach Dussault. I'm not really in favor or against this project. I initially was not very excited about it because of the number of parking spaces. And to that point, if I'm interpreting staff report correctly, by meeting alternative transportation goals, I think it's one major or two minor, this site has been able to double its minimum parking capacity, which kind of seems contrary to the intent of that that part of the parking ordinance. You would think by meeting alternate transportation goals, you'd be reducing parking on site. And I believe they use their parking calculations off those doubled minimums. But at the same time, they are working with a very challenging site to be engaging to pedestrians and bicyclists. I went and visited the site by bike, and that wasn't very fun to do. I think 5th South and 6th South are probably two of the worst streets in the entire city to decide to go for a walk along. I think the one-way nature of both those streets kind of leads to a interurban highway feel, and I know I think those are state DOT streets, so the city doesn't really have a lot of influence on that. But I do love the inclusion of Dutch street design on the interior of the project. That's kind of what got me into city planning in the first place. So I guess I have a slightly positive slant towards the project after the presentation of the developer, but just mainly concerned with the number of parking. And I know that I believe it was shown in some of the renderings that I don't know how far in the future this is, but I believe UTA is planning a tracks line along west and with a stop on this block. So that's just another thing to keep in mind. And I know, again, it's a very challenging site. One of these billboards on the way out of 5th South might as well say, left person leaving Salt Lake, turn off the light. So I think that this is a definite improvement to what's currently on the block. Thanks.
Thank you. Is there any other members of the public or anyone who is listening in who would like to express an opinion? Seeing none, I will close the public hearing and move it back to staff and to the applicant and ask if the commission has any questions or comments that they would like to pursue at this point.
Madam Chair, my only question, I think, is there a public easement that goes through on the mid-block crossings on Post Road, or is it just a private street that is open and closed?
Yeah, so the intent, yeah, is to have public easements on those streets. Yes, we're building it for the public and want the public there to activate it. Obviously, we have retailers along these streets as well as, you know, an office building that's 70,000 square feet, that's the one-story existing commercial building, and the existing other buildings are retail, you know, commercial buildings. So yeah, the intent is for public access to be able to access all of these different spots and areas.
And for staff, is there, I mean, I know other projects have put saying public needs to have access during normal hours, or I mean, is that something to do here? Is it set up in a way we don't need to worry about that already?
Commissioner, I can respond. We've done similar things. I don't know who was on the commission when the Sugarmont Apartments project.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking about in particular.
So we did require that an easement was put into place that would just allow for for it to allow for public access. You know, I think and we could work with Paul to make sure this gets done correctly, but to allow them obviously to close for events and things like that, but to be generally open to the public at all times.
Does staff feel it's necessary or not really?
My default to Casey on that one. I mean, I think it's important. It's a street that's existed a long time. It is private, but there has been, you know, this connection between Fifth and Sixth South for a long time. So I think that I would think it's important. I don't know if Casey has any other feelings on that.
I mean, it probably wouldn't hurt to formalize it. I know, I get the sense from the applicant that they're really intending to keep that as a public way. But I'm not too concerned from their intent, but formalizing it wouldn't hurt me.
We're happy to do so.
Great. Well, this is an extremely complicated project. I spent an hour or two this afternoon trying to work it out. And thank you for this particular drawing, which wasn't in the staff report or in any of the reports, because it's very helpful in terms of identifying the public space. And I think it's you have to be commended for this project and for putting it together, actually, to try to get it done. I am a little interested in why you are separating this application from and not doing the whole site as one project.
Yeah, for a few reasons. Partially because we are developing it in phases. So I believe that the large commercial building has already been submitted to the city. We have multiple partners on this project that are kind of leading the different pieces of it as we go. Obviously, the rest of the buildings are a little bit easier just because they're existing buildings. We worked really hard to keep, they're challenging buildings, as many old buildings are. We feel like it's really important in Salt Lake to keep old existing buildings that have character, and so there's a barrel roof building there that's really a great building. We do own a half block on the other side of Fifth South with the A&Z produce building. We're keeping that building, and it's currently being renovated. So these other pieces are moving along, but we're doing them with the different pieces. We have different lenders on the various pieces as well, and the timing is different just from how long it takes to go through each of the pieces. But we have been working with the city on a regular basis on the entire block and a half. John Anderson's been in regular meetings with us for probably the last year and a half, talking about the full block and a half, is working with the city kind of in a comprehensive, plan.
Thank you.
Madam Chair, if I could just, this is John Anderson, just to respond. I have met with them many, many times about this project. One of the reasons is those other buildings are not going to require any sort of planning commission approval because they're existing structures and they'll just be remodeled. And so there isn't going to be an application before you for these structures. It's just these on the eastern half where they're building new buildings, and so where they're needing things like design review and plan development that's actually going to go to the planning commission for review.
Right. So in that regard, I'm concerned about this, what's being called an existing parking lot, which is not really anything but just broken up paving at this point. And whether or not, I mean, we would not allow a parking lot like this to go forward if this project were brought in altogether. That's one of the concerns that I was sort of expressing. And is that big parking lot going to remain then? Or what? It's not, like I said, it's hardly a parking lot. It's a broken up set of paving right now.
Yeah, no, the intent is that it'll be improved and planted and added trees, as you're seeing on this drawing, but it is planned to stay as a parking lot. As you can see, there's a large billboard on that parking lot. And so until we can deal with billboard issues, those kind of things, it is intended to be a parking lot. We would love at some point to be able to turn that into a buildable parcel and be able to do something down the road for sure.
But it's because of the billboard that you don't intend to do anything now, or because parking is required, or?
Yeah, no, it's there's a myriad of challenges, but yeah, billboards being one of, the primary challenge, yes.
Okay, that's the billboard there that you're highlighting.
And then there's another one too.
Right.
You have to view sight lines for it's challenging.
Yes. And what is that building going to be, the old NHT building?
It's
but it's important for us to know what that is what the intention there is.
Yeah, it's basically planned as creative office.
Oh, creative office. Okay.
Yeah. I think you guys probably know the industry developers. They're the ones who are leading that, doing a similar type of program for that building. It's very cool stuff.
And can you show the building 5 again and its 400 West Street facade? Thank you. So this building does not have any commercial in it. Is that correct?
Correct.
So, so is this a variance that we're requesting then? To have ground floor retail.
This part of the project is a general commercial zone, which has very minimal, if any, design standards.
Okay.
So they're not changing any design standards. They're asking for additional height and then reduced front and rear setback. That's it.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Does anyone else have any comments or questions for the applicant?
I'm happy to make a motion.
Go for it.
Do I do these together, or do I need to do them separate?
I believe you can do them together.
So based on the findings listed in the staff report, testimony presented, I move the Planning Commission approve Gale Street Mixed Use Design Review Petition PLN PCM 2019-00902, and also approve Planning Commission Mixed Use Plan Development Petition PLN SUB 2019-01196, with the conditions listed in the staff report, and adding a final condition that kind of a public right-of-way be secured for the mid-block crossing, similar to what the language is on the Sugarmont property in Sugar House, with final approval of that delegated to staff.
Do you mean a public easement?
Yeah, I don't remember what we did exactly on that Sugarmont. There was some language that had to be open during certain hours, but we kind of worked back and forth. It was a good compromise. I mean, it allowed them to close the public street, but also allowed them to.
You said right of way, but you meant easement.
Yeah, easement.
Okay,
Thank you for clarifying.
okay. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Okay, I'll take a second from Maureen. Thank you. It has been moved and seconded. Is there any additional discussion?
So I want to bring up the point of building one, the question of the 4 parallel parking stalls to reduce the required landscaping. I don't think that that is necessary at all, because there's going to be parking literally 15 feet just west of it. And I'm really, really opposed to that part. I think we should continue to require that to be landscaped like the city ordinance requires.
In my general view, Fifth South and 6th South are such heavily trafficked streets. I'm not sure, and this goes to the rant too, that people are traveling on it. They're more traveling through the block. And I think the applicant, the billboards, it's actually a state law, it's not city ordinance, so let's clarify that. But the state law is so awful to have to deal with, and what they've done to navigate those. The pool, I think, is a beautiful project on a really dealing with some difficulties around some of the billboards.
Yeah, but so Matt,
I'm going to give some room on this stuff. If they feel like.
So Matt, okay, this is how I'm interpreting it, and please tell me what you're thinking is different. The questions for building one was increase the setback from 10 feet to 21 feet, which I'm understanding is because of the billboard, and I'm totally fine with that. The second question on building one was to allow for a reduction in landscaping for 4 parallel parking stalls. That has nothing to do with the increased setback required for the billboard. And that's at least how I'm interpreting it.
I have another perspective on this, which is that I actually am in favor of having those parking spaces, even though it's only 4 of them. Sometimes it would make it may make the market more successful for people to actually believe from time to time that they would be able to park in front of it, even though they probably won't because the spaces will be full. So, and also to use that little driveway there as a drop off, and we've recently seen how nice it is to be able to do that. And I think that actually they are not so egregious on a street like 500 South. So, but would anyone like to? I'm sorry. Go ahead, Matt.
Honestly, I mean, we could dive into that with staff, but I don't feel so strongly that we would to change it from the applicant's proposal. I mean, I probably don't understand all the details. We could probably dive into that deeper on what landscaping could be there or not be there, but I'm generally okay with the landscaping as presented, so I'll probably just keep my motion as is.
Amy, would you like to propose an amendment?
Yeah, because actually, if we keep that parking, I probably will vote no, even though I think overall this is good. But I don't think if we're going to do it for building one, we should be doing it for building two. I don't think it's necessary, given that there will be parking literally 10 feet away, 15 feet away. So I would propose an amendment. I'm not sure procedurally how best to do that.
So an amendment, you can propose an amendment. The original motion maker would have to accept that, or you can offer a new motion.
Yeah, you can do a substitute motion, which is to proceed on.
Right.
Well, I mean, nobody else has piped in about it. I'm not going to do it if nobody else cares, but it'll probably affect my overall vote.
Do you mind if I just comment on that as well?
Say again?
Sorry, do you mind if I just comment on that as well from the ownership side?
I think we're in the motion discussion phase right now.
Okay, I didn't know the procedures on that.
So, anybody else want to comment on that, or?
So Brenda, I would have to kind of agree with you that having that little drop-off space for the quick and dirty run into the grocery store or pick up your groceries or whatever it is, it doesn't bother me that it's there. I think it's kind of an amenity for the store. Sorry, me.
Would anyone call the question?
I would just make one more comment, and it's that it looks like the pavers on the parking stalls are a slightly different material, which would make it feel more, almost like a landscape, but more pedestrian. So when cars aren't there, it might be inviting for people to just walk across. So I'm kind of indifferent to whether we keep it or not, but I don't feel like it's as imposing as it may seem from plan.
All right, so is there any more discussion? Hearing none, I will call the question. All in favor? Oh, wait, I have to go down the road. So we have a motion on the table, made by Matt and seconded by Maureen. John?
Yes.
Crystal?
Yes.
Maureen?
Yes.
Amy?
No.
Matt?
Yes.
Andres?
I'll vote yay.
Sarah?
Yes.
And Adrian is abstaining, correct? All right. So the vote is 6-1, 6-4, and 1 against, and the motion passes and the project is approved. Thank you all very much.
Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Appreciate the time.
And I will turn it back over to Adrian unless she already left.
No, I'm still here.
If I were her, I would do. Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Wait, if there's anything else we need to go.
Yeah, Madam Chair, I wanted just to make a
your
comment to the director on this. So, first of all, you know, I spent more than an hour and a half trying to digest this in the last couple of days. And I would just really like to suggest, Wayne, that there may be opportunities in the future. I can think of the fleet block right off the top of my head, where we may have something this large that is really hard to dissect. And I will say, if it wasn't for Casey's really great report and very good presentation and the applicant's really A+ presentation, this would have been so much harder. I almost envisioned there would be no way I could get through this tonight. That we have a work session or something ahead of time to introduce it to us so that we can think through these things, because we may not get such a quality staff report or this type of a quality presentation from the developer to help muddle that through. So I don't know if there's a standard you can employ that if something is X big, that you allow us more time to figure out how to like work through it in our heads and all of the components to it. Because this, I didn't think this would go as smoothly for me, because this was really daunting to try to picture and to understand it all from just reading the staff report.
I would second that. I think that this, I was angry actually, going through this thing, because this is a huge project to, you know, have just a few days to go over and really, and also to suggest that we might have suggestions or comments or, you know, things to improve at this late state. I really think that this and all projects of this size and scale need to have a work session.
Great. No, thanks for the feedback. Very much appreciated. We do try to, yeah, we're not extremely consistent on what we do with work sessions. So we'll take that back to the drawing board and try to come up with a better game plan on what to bring to you guys ahead of time.
Okay. Any other thoughts? Parting thoughts? All right. With that, we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone, for your time and your patience. Very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Thank you.
this is a hard time. I think we've got true heroes in our community, the first responders, and anyone who's struggling with this. I'm super impressed and grateful to be in the state of Utah. You know, as we look at some of our colleagues in other states, they're getting pulled